Lord of Mysteries, Death. By author, Lucian_Morningstar. Chapter 1-20. Chapter 1. Cosmos. October 5, 1349. East Byam. Brendan was a village in East Byam's coastal area. It came under the direct authority of Augustus III after his kingdom, Loan, colonized a portion of the southern continent. The main religion in Brendan was Lord of Storms, as most of the villagers were reliant on the seas, though the religion of death was still practiced secretly. All in all, Brendan was a village that was insignificant in the grand scheme of things. However, a lad was about to change not only the fate of this paltry village but also the entire world. Lucian was the lad in question. He was the son of an officer from Loan and a maid from Brendan. His mother perished giving birth to him, and his father abandoned him in an orphanage. Even though the villagers were somewhat prejudiced against him because of his heritage, Lucian paid their voices no heed, living his life as he wished. Throughout his youth, he was bright and curious, soaking up information like a sponge. He wasn't satisfied with what he obtained, always wanting more, and that was the end of him, for his reckless pursuit of knowledge brought death upon him. His life should have ended here. The villagers would have discovered his corpse, gutted and disembodied, at the corner of the road the next morning. They would have bothered enough to give him a proper burial, following old traditions, and then his name would have been all but forgotten by them, swept away in the tides of time. But something changed or interfered, an unknown force that even the mightiest gods were unaware of. And fate was shattered. A pale hand reached out from the colorless river, clutching the quill of fate and rewriting destiny into a story different than what it was intended to be. Ultimately, it was a tale of death, the end of all things. Around the world, astronomers who had awoken early, as well as mysticism experts and covert beyonders, cast their gazes aloft into the sky, more specifically at the moon that hung in the night sky shimmering with stars. Their eyes were soon filled with astonishment, for the moon was no longer crimson. In a stunned daze, a detective looked out the window of his home in Backland. "The moon," he whispered, gazing at the moon, which had turned white and abnormally bright. Far from the senses of mortals, a phantom image of an indescribable being floated above the white moon. It had countless eyes, and they all gazed down on Earth, the southern continent, East Byam, Brendan, and ultimately, at Lucian lying on a dusty road, frail and bloody, like a withering twig, slowly sinking into the pale and cold arms of death. But his silver eyes were wide open, gazing at the silver moon, brimming with such emotions and vitality, bearing such a contraindication in and of themselves. "No, no. Why? Which sadistic fuck decided to curse me to this world?" Lucian whispered, his eyes wide with dread and hopelessness. Allow him to explain his situation before the outer gods claimed him. He wasn't actually Lucian, but someone from Earth. To be honest, his life was fairly mundane, but his dreams were not. They were magnificent and grand. He envisioned a life of freedom and excitement. He dreamed of seeing the old and new wonders of the world. He dreamed of filling his passport with stamps from all the countries in the world. He dreamed of settling down after everything in the city that never sleeps. He dreamed of truly living his life. He dreamed and dreamed, but when faced with reality, his dreams were shattered one by one, and what remained of him was someone who learned to accept but still hope for the impossible. His life was turned upside down when he was diagnosed with cancer. That broke whatever hope was left in him, but he refused to give up on his life, so he struggled and struggled to flee the claws of death that were reaching for his soul. He just wanted to live, and in his desperation, he did something that would have appalled his former self. He prayed to God for salvation with faith in his heart. However, he was confronted by reality again, for there was no answer to his prayers. Death soon took him, embracing him within its cold and indifferent embrace. His tale did not end there. Perhaps God heard his prayers and took pity on him, or the cosmos itself made an error. Either way, he was reincarnated into the body of dead Lucian, and if the memories of this body were any indication, this was the world of Lord of Mysteries. Alarm bells started to sound in his head as he tried to stop his thoughts from delving into the knowledge of the cosmos, but it was too late. And that was how he found himself in this fatal position, cursing all the deities of the earth for his wretched and hopeless fate. They finally arrived from the infinite and boundless heights of the cosmos, flooding his consciousness with their incoherent whispers and murmurs. And he felt agony, pain unlike anything he'd ever felt, tearing mercilessly through his being. And he shrieked, screaming until his throat felt like it was tearing apart, his vision became blurry and bloody, his sanity seemed to gradually dwindle, and he could do nothing but watch. The same feeling of helplessness once again filled his entire being. He hated it. What he didn't realize was that all around him, roses began to bloom, as white as snow, emitting a nihilistic aura that covered him, protecting him from the corruption of the starry sky. But the cosmos was unyielding, attempting to strengthen their connection with Lucian, which was established by his knowledge of them, in order to destroy those flowers and successfully corrupt this anomaly that they couldn't understand. And they were succeeding, as the white roses at the border had gone crimson with corruption, mutating and spreading into all the roses as the corruption reached the shivering and trembling Lucian in a bloody cascade. He was struggling to hold onto his slipping mind. As the cold and indifferent claws of death began to sink into his being once again, the maddening whispers suddenly escaped him, granting him a moment of clarity that amounted to filling his heart with grim determination. He refused to let death take him again. He needed to live, he wanted to live, no matter what. So he gathered his last ounces of strength and did something extremely reckless and dangerous, but it was the only option with at least a chance of survival. "Adam!" he screamed, trying to imbue his voice with all the knowledge of the ancient sun god in the hopes of attracting the attention of the Creator, himself. Immediately, he saw light, a light so blinding, so magnificent, so mighty, that it seemed to engulf the world itself. And the last thing he heard was an angry roar from the starry sky and calm footsteps close by before the blinding light consumed him as well and his awareness faded away into slumber. Pillar. The first thing that he noticed as soon as he opened his eyes was a colossal cross that was 100 meters tall. Then he instantly looked down at himself and allowed himself a sigh of relief for the moment when he saw that he was not only in one piece but also felt brisker and fresher than ever before. It almost felt like he was reborn. Well, considering his situation, that description wouldn't be far off. After once again making sure that he was fine, he looked around and discovered that he was sitting in a long wooden row inside of what appeared to be a church made of the bones of every mythical creature, from dragon to elf, from giant to phoenix. All of them were here, embedded on the surface of each column, arch, and dome, but instead of appearing eerie, everything was filled with holiness. "This is the corpse cathedral," he thought, but his emotions were mostly calm, not like someone who had just confronted death and was almost corrupted by the outer gods. There was also the fact that he was within the domain of arguably the most frightening being in the cosmos. "You're finally awake," a gentle voice spoke, catching his attention and prompting him to shift his gaze to the cross. A stately figure stood up from the praying posture and turned to look at him with warm eyes. He was none other than Adam, the angel of imagination. "How should I call you, Lucian, or by your previous name?" Adam asked, walking towards him. Even though he expected Adam to already know all about his previous life, hearing it personally made him feel a tinge of dread that managed to break through his serene emotions. He forced himself to calm down, which proved simple because whatever kept his emotions calm helped him. Then he looked ahead at Adam. "Lucian," he said silently, accepting his new life without any reservations as he didn't have any privilege to struggle on that, considering his situation. He needed to be steadfast and determined if he wanted to survive in the end. "Lucian." Adam nodded and took a seat next to Lucian. He looked ahead at the cross and continued, "You are adapting fast. This solves most of your problems." "Problems?" Lucian inquired solemnly, his gaze unconsciously trailing his body to double-check himself. "Did you save me?" "Partially," Adam said frankly. "You resisted the corruption of the cosmos until I arrived." "What?" Lucian asked, unbelievably. After all, this was the corruption of the cosmos that only angels and above could withstand, and he was a thorough mortal in essence. Adam didn't respond. Instead, he took out a white as snow rose and gave it to Lucian, who felt a strange connection to it. "What do you see in it?" Lucian looked thoughtfully at the rose in his palm. After a short pause, he said, "Death, I see death." He genuinely did, and he couldn't explain how, but he truly saw death, the end of all things, in the rose. "That's what you are," Adam revealed gently, his limpid eyes gazing at Lucian. "Death. I am death." Lucian pointed to himself, clearly feeling the irony of the moment. He didn't doubt what Adam revealed, as there was really no reason for him to lie. And if Adam had wanted to do something to him, he would have already been dead. "You are not as mortal as you believe yourself to be," Adam said, his gaze was deep and far away. "You carry a power that embodies death, even more so than the authority held by Salinger in the past." He paused in a moment of reckoning silence. "To be frank, the power within you resembles a pillar of the cosmos, and the strange thing is, it seemed to be part of the cosmos, like a missing piece of the cosmic puzzle." "You don't mean?" Lucian's eyes widened at the implications involved in the words of Adam. Adam confirmed his guesses. His tone was as gentle as ever, despite the shocking truth he was revealing. "Given your existence, my preliminary findings from research into the existence of the fourth pillar should be incorrect. It might not be hidden at all but rather broken, one component within you, the other within the Western continent." "Is that even possible?" Lucian asked, while thanking the power, which most likely belonged to Adam, for keeping his feelings calm and serene in the face of these constant shocking revelations. The angel of imagination just implied that the combination of his power and the river of eternal darkness should result in the birth of the fourth pillar, one that does not, he hopes, end the cosmos. "It is, if my assumptions prove to be correct in the end," Adam said calmly. Many questions about his existence raced through Lucian's thoughts, but only one remained in the end. "How come I feel so good if my power is part of the cosmos?" he inquired of Adam. "Just look at me, can you see any madness?" Adam's lips twitched as though he was smiling. "Madness can be subjective when it involves the divine. For example, most people who are aware of the true Creator consider him to be completely insane and crazy, which he definitely is, but his insane state is not the same as it is for humans. He is just much more emotional and humane compared to other deities. In your case, though, I am not sure." The angel of imagination continued, casting a sidelong glance at Lucian. "Your existence is shrouded in mystery, some of which I unraveled and some of which I didn't, for I foresaw that if I uncovered all of your mysteries forcefully, then the apocalypse would begin immediately. Just what have I become?" Lucian thought, gazing at his hands. Adam's final remarks sent shivers down his spine. Apocalypse, the unavoidable end of the world, and in it, the solar system would become a battleground between outer gods and great old ones, with Earth caught in the center. And his existence could genuinely lead to something as terrible as that. He wasn't really sure how to feel about it. "I can see your struggles with your power." Adam held the silver cross that hung from his neck. "So I give you a choice: accept it and embark on a divine path, or ignore it and spend the rest of your life in peace and obscurity." Lucian didn't even bother to contemplate the choice. Then, with a wry grin, he shook his head. "I don't really have the luxury of choice. After all, my very existence changes everything. I may face a lot of paths in the future, however, the path of peace and obscurity isn't one of them." He squinted at Adam. "But you already know all of this, so was that a test?" Adam didn't answer. Instead, he merely asked, his clear gaze fixed on Lucian. "Do you accept it or not?" "Do I accept it or not?" Lucian thought heavily, and then he answered with grim determination. "Yes." "What? Did you expect him to hesitate and brood on it?" "Never." This was the world of mysteries, and as he had already decided, he needed to be resolute and determined if he wanted to survive and live his new life in the end. Adam said gently. "Good." Lucian was surprised to hear a compliment from Adam himself, but he suppressed it and focused on the most pressing issue that he was facing. "There is something, my power, I can't feel it." He asked Adam. He really couldn't feel the power of death. He tried to sense it within himself, but he didn't find anything that proved he wasn't immortal. "That's because your power is dormant," Adam revealed. "When the outer gods noticed you and tried to corrupt you, it awoke and protected you from them instinctively until I arrived and saved you completely. So it was losing to them. Lucian pressed, seeing through the nuances in Adam's words. Yes. Adam nodded. Only a portion of your power intervened to protect you, the rest remained dormant, because if everything had awoken, your new body would not have been able to withstand it. Lucian mulled over his words for the moment, and then he asked somberly. So how can I awaken my power? Adam stood up from Lucian and walked before him, gazing down at him. I will help you awaken it. To say Lucian was surprised would be an understatement. After all, he didn't expect Adam to assist him with this. Rather, he expected the angel of imagination to instruct him to take the pathway of death. But this didn't make him feel any elation, for nothing was ever free in the world. Lucian met his gentle gaze as he gathered courage and asked outrightly, why? Adam answered, his tone as serene as ever. Your existence breaks the trend of the times, so changes have to be made, and you are going to be at the center of it all, Lucian. Lucian gulped. Will I be able to bear it? He asked, steering the subject away from the trend of the times. Ultimately, it is up to you. Adam stated. All I'll do is slightly simulate your power out of dormancy, and it'll be up to you how much of the power you'll bear in your current state. I couldn't bear it all, that's for sure. Lucian said rationally, then looked gravely at Adam. What exactly do you mean when you say I'm not mortal? Is this linked to why I'd be able to bear the power that resembles a pillar? It's your soul, Adam said calmly. That's really special and different. And yes, it is what allows you to bear and hold the power. Lucian asked another question about his power, as he really didn't want to delve into this path blindly. So if I only awakened a part of my power, do I have to take the path of the divine to awaken the rest of it? Yes. Adam answered patiently, though your situation is special, you probably don't have to start from the low sequence. So now that you have asked all of your questions, are you ready, Lucian? Lucian took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was about to happen, and then nodded resolutely. Yes, awaken it. Adam raised his hand and pointed at his glabella. Ascend. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 3. Reaper. Ascend. Everything around Lucian faded into darkness, and his already serene emotions became even calmer and more tranquil, to the point where he wondered if his emotions were fading into nothingness, but he felt the resolve and determination that pushed him to take his path remain within the layers of serenity in his heart, shattering his doubts. Grabbing that firmly, he glanced around, only to find the darkness unveiling itself like theater curtains for the grand spectacle, which it truly was, for before him a magnificent scene unfolded. All around him, the cosmos revealed itself in all of its boundlessness and limitlessness, brilliant galaxies whirling in symphony, nebula clouds swaying in harmony, and shining stars dancing in cacophony. He also witnessed the celestial bodies, black holes, red giants, white dwarfs, supergiants, and pulsars, that were all endless, and they burned in the blackness of space like flecks of color on a dark canvas. It was all woven together in the cosmic ocean, which contained all that was, had ever been, and would ever be. Lucian witnessed the cosmos in all of its glory, and he couldn't help but feel awe. But the feeling that erupted from his serene heart was cut short when he felt something awaken within himself, something so horrifying, so chilling, and so terrifying, he knew exactly what it was. It was death. Lucian had prepared himself for anything, from soul-tearing agony to the possibility of losing control, but what happened next completely caught him off guard. An eerie wave of still darkness erupted from within him, sweeping the entire cosmos in an instant. Death had arrived, unleashing its authorities on the universe. And the cosmos collapsed on itself, its forces withered by decay, its lives shattered by senescence, its fates tainted by corruption, and its essence extinguished by nihility. Lucian's silver eyes reflected the breaking cosmos. He saw galaxies melting away into nothingness. He saw stars imploding in one final brilliance. He saw the mighty outer deities trying to resist the inevitable fate with all their might, but only to utterly fail and perish into oblivion. He even saw the Earth collapsing along with the solar system. As he witnessed the end of the cosmos, Lucian realized something. Truth came to him on its own, and this would actually be his duty. After the last living thing dies, he would put the chairs on the tables, turn out the lights, and lock the cosmos behind him when he leaves, for he would be the death, the ultimate end of all things. Now the real question was, whether he was willing to accept this duty and become the death. That question floated through his head as Lucian looked ahead at the last remnants of the cosmos that were falling around him, forming a cosmic grave. In it, he found the ruins of innumerable civilizations, each telling him a bright and tragic story of hope and failure. Was he truly willing to bear this duty? The answer instinctively came to Lucian, yes. He murmured to himself. He had chosen this path, and he was determined to see it through. This was his second chance at life, and he intended to live it to the fullest, which required power. And he also understood this power wasn't without a price, but still, he was determined to tread forward for his dreams, for his hopes, for his desires, and so he accepted the duty of death. With that acceptance, the wave of still darkness that had erupted from him and caused the end of the cosmos returned, fusing with him in a roar. Immediately, Lucian felt the blood pound in his ears. His heart thudded in his chest. His hands shook. His feet tingled. His vision was disfigured, as if he were looking through a fisheye lens. But he persevered, fixated on his dreams, which were guardian lights guiding him out of the pain that threatened to tear apart his being. Still breathing was hard, really hard, as if he'd just run a marathon around the world. His emotions, however, had been broken free from the grasps of serenity and plunged into chaos. However, elation was the most prominent emotion he was experiencing, aside from dread, because despite his current state, he discovered that he was evolving. He was ascending, and so he persisted. Corpse Cathedral. Adam held his silver cross calmly, looking ahead at a swirl of still and endless darkness wreaking havoc on the interior of the cathedral, but the colossal cross in the altar emitted blinding light along with all the bones, gently shining on the darkness in a bid to soothe it, but the darkness seemed to only become more restless. Then it suddenly calmed down and faded away, revealing a figure. The figure was a lad with a youth that seemed to exist outside of time. He was bronze-skinned, of average height, and had a chiseled build. His black hair was short and frizzy, exuding a darkness rivaled only by the void. His eyes were platinum silver, sparkling like the argent moon at night. He wore deep, dark robes embroidered with golden threads. But these were not the most noticeable aspects of him, rather, 6 pairs of wings with metallic colors unveiled themselves grimly from behind his back. He was none other than Lucian, who had managed to successfully awaken part of his power. Lucian opened his eyes and felt the world of difference from his previous self. First of all, he felt liberated, like shackles that he didn't know existed within him had been broken. Though he had a good idea of what it was, he broke free from his mortality and became a mythical creature. He was free from basic human needs such as eating and sleeping, and his body had evolved, becoming much stronger and more resilient to the point he doubted any attack below the level of authorities could even touch or harm him. Second, his mind was filled with knowledge about the power he had awakened. He held the authorities of decay and soul, which were the aspects of death, and a long list of other abilities that were also related to death, necromancy, teleportation, resurrection, and so on. Third, his senses had evolved, revealing him a completely different side of reality. He saw a chaotic and abstract world filled with all kinds of information and a myriad of spirits, and above it all were 7 lights of different colors. There was another world that was even more abstract than the previous one, as though all the authorities and symbolism of the universe were included within it. He could even tell you when and how the mystical creatures whose skulls were in Bone Cathedral perished. He could also see who they were when they were living. Oh my God, those bones actually belonged to ancient gods. Fourth, he had attained immortality. Actually, his current condition was a little complicated. He was neither alive nor dead, but somewhere in between. He'd transformed into something more abstract and conceptual in essence, becoming closer to death. Finally, he noticed 6 pairs of wings unfolding from behind his back, indicating how far he had ascended. He had become an archangel. To be honest, that was a fast power-up. He had gone from mortal to Archangel in a matter of moments. And he finally felt some true joy and relief, because with this power, he wouldn't just die as soon as he left the corpse cathedral. Restraining his thoughts, Lucian descended onto the ground and finally managed to notice the situation around him. The interior of the corpse cathedral had been completely destroyed and disintegrated, with only ashes left. The bones and cross, though, seemed completely unaffected. Lucian cleared his throat. "Sorry," he said to Adam, scratching the back of his neck. Adam merely waved his hand in the air. The corpse cathedral was immediately restored to its previous state. Then, he strode toward Lucian from the cross. "You have become an archangel," the angel of imagination stated. There was no surprise in his countenance, as though he already expected this, though it could be due to the fact that all Adam had was divinity, not humanity. And this somewhat frustrated Lucian, for it made Adam completely unpredictable. "Yes." Lucian looked at his metallic wings. "I have." Adam merely hummed. He didn't seem to want to press into any more details about Lucian's current state. And so Lucian continued, a somber look marring his countenance. "So what is the price for your help, Adam?" he asked outright. "Price?" Adam said. "You already partially paid it." Lucian hesitated for a moment, as he had a good idea of what he had paid, but in the end, he still asked. "Is it the knowledge from the previous life?" "Yes." Adam nodded, clutching the silver cross. "Even though I have already foreseen most of the future of the world, your knowledge of what was about to happen was still valuable to me as it was more detailed and comprehensive." "So you know that," Lucian trailed off into a conflicting silence, finalizing the rest of the sentence within his heart. "This world was considered fictional in my previous life." Adam smiled gently, as though he understood what Lucian wanted to convey. Then, he glanced up at the Archangel. "What is the line between reality and fiction?" He proceeded slowly. "Lucian, with your ascension, you should be able to feel and understand the world around you more, so tell me, do you believe it is any less real than your previous world?" Lucian looked past the corpse cathedral, at the world outside in a moment of scrutinizing silence. "No," he finally answered to Adam. This world felt no different from his home, though it was also somewhat more beautiful and magnificent, as well as horrifying and twisted. It felt truly real in every sense. "That is all needed," Adam said. His gaze was somewhere far away. "Faith. Faith." Lucian furrowed his brows, but before he could inquire further, Adam interrupted, talking out a bunch of documents, a set of money notes, and a key from out of nowhere, and then, he passed it to Lucian, who accepted it curiously. The angel of imagination revealed. "These are your identity documents, which deem you a proper citizen of Eastern Biome, as well as a few £1,000 and a key." This, Lucian was surprised. He didn't really give much thought to his identity issues, which he previously didn't have. This actually solved many problems and would allow him to integrate into the world completely. Adam pointed at the key and instructed. "This key will lead to a villa in the capital of Eastern Biome. Take some rest and adjust to your new life and powers. I will also send someone to teach you about the basic knowledge of mysticism." He immediately continued, answering the question that Lucian wanted to ask. "After you are completely prepared, we will talk more about your path." Lucian looked at the documents in his hand deeply for a moment and then nodded to Adam, accepting his instructions. Adam suddenly warned, "I have concealed your existence, but the gazes of the gods are completely focused on the world, searching for you, the source of disturbance that caused the appearance of the white moon. And the forces of the outer gods are also looking for you, so keep your head low for now, Lucian." Lucian chuckled wryly. "So I am already famous?" he ventured. "Have they given me a title or something?" "They have." Adam said so, much to his surprise. "The outer gods call you the Reaper." "The Reaper, huh?" Lucian smiled ironically. "That's cool. Anyway, I will be off and about now." He began to walk towards the door of the corpse cathedral in firm footsteps, but when he reached the foyer, he turned and gazed back at Adam. "Thank you," he said silently before opening the door and leaving the cathedral. Adam gazed at the door of his cathedral in silence for a moment, then, he took out a deck of tarot cards from his robes, and from within it, he selected 3 cards while divining the future. They were the Fool, the Chariot, and the Death. Kolain. Kolain embodied everything that the southern continent stood for. Bright sunlight, fresh air, a clean environment, fresh cutscene, unique cultures, and the feeling of freedom that was present in the yearning souls. Kolain was the capital of East Balam. It had a lengthy and rich history dating back to the end of the 4th epoch. It was also where Russell, the great Emperor Caesar, first landed after discovering a new, safer sea path to the southern continent, which inadvertently kicked off the era of colonialism. Both the Inuits Empire and the Loan Kingdom desired control of Kolain at the time because of its strategic and vital position as the gateway to the southern continent. In the end, Loan won the colonial war and took control of Kolain, successfully establishing its dominance over the seas and trade routes between the southern and northern continents. All in all, Kolain was the epicenter of the southern continent. People from all over the world arrive every day to catch a glimpse of this city, to escape their old lives and begin anew in this new world through the ships with hope and dream. And Lucian was among them, arriving in Kolain by traveling through the spirit world rather than by ship. The first time he used his abilities was an eye-opening experience. He didn't have any difficulties with it because, when he used his powers, it felt natural and instinctive, as if he had already used it many times before and couldn't be more familiar with it. This development didn't surprise him, for he knew abilities that came with meander pathways were similar to this situation. He didn't rush to the villa, instead, he went sightseeing in Kolain. He couldn't stop his wanderlust, but he didn't forget to keep his head down, slipping into the identity Adam had created for him, a wealthy and kind noble of a foreign city who had recently moved to Kolain, which proved to be simple because his sole authority came in handy, allowing him to avoid any raising of brows. His sole authority allowed him to directly control, manipulate, and alter the souls of living beings, even enabling him to create the soul itself. Using it, he subtly manipulated people to subconsciously ignore any abnormalities in his new identity. He really didn't have much talent for acting, so he decided to be cautious and cover his tracks, being as discreet as possible. Then Lucian gave in to his wanderlust, exploring Kolain with zeal and curiosity. In stark contrast to the rest of the southern continent, the capital city was magnificent and rich. It was teeming with people, a cacophony of voices filling the metropolis. He visited historical sites and monuments, as well as markets and bazaars, as well as fairs and carnivals, thoroughly immersing himself in the zeal of the southern continent. He had noticed that the majority of people in Kolain believed in the Lord of Storms, who had a huge cathedral visible from all corners of the city, whereas the religion of the Evernight goddess was almost non-existent. And from the information he had gathered from merchants, the religion of storms was most prevalent in regions of the southern continent. It seemed that the Lord of Storms held the most influence over the southern continent among the 7 deities. Lucian strode along the winding streets and rising monuments of Kolain, admiring everything. But as the old adage says, everything has 2 sides, and Kolain was no exception. It had a dark side. Through his sole authority, he discovered numerous human trafficking networks in the slums of the capital city. It was filled with people kidnapped from all around Eastern Hayam who were most likely being shipped to Loan to construct mausoleums for the apotheosis ritual of the Black Emperor. The images he saw when he read the memories of a few mortal traffickers through their souls made him sick to his stomach. It was too inhumane and callous. Those kidnapped people were literally treated worse than livestock. The dark side of Kolain once again reminded Lucian of the kind of world he was living in. He ultimately did not interfere with the trafficking because, even with his current powers, this was not an issue he could fix for the time being. At the very least, the fine cuisine that Kolain had to offer lifted Lucian out of his gloom. He made his way to the capital's most renowned restaurant, the Fine Line. He then took a seat by a window with a perfect view of the city. "What is your order, sir?" A server approached him with courtesy. She addressed him in Dudanese, the official tongue of the southern continent. And, fortunately, he knew this language, thanks to his memories. Lucian looked at the menu. Firma coffee. As well as this and this, he indicated seafood dishes on the menu. But bring the coffee first. The waitress took the order with a hum and then glanced at an array of bags filled with souvenirs and mementos that were near him. First time in Kolain. Yes, Lucian nodded. I wish you a pleasant stay, the waitress smiled, and Lucian nodded gently, then she left his table and wound her way to get his order. As he waited for his order, Lucian looked out the window at the city, his chin resting comfortably on his knuckles. His mind began to wander unconsciously back to the second time he confronted death. He still struggled with the helplessness he felt when the outer gods attempted to corrupt him. Thinking about it reminded him of his fight with cancer, which he lost hopelessly despite all of his efforts and struggles. He didn't want to recall those times again. Adam saved him the second time, but if he ever faced a similar situation again, he needed to depend on no one but himself. This was his path, after all. And his decision to call out to Adam in that moment of desperation was reckless and dangerous, Lucian admitted, but he didn't lament it because Adarn had something that almost no other higher being possessed. It was fairness. He was certain that he would already be dead or might even have suffered a worse fate than death if he had attempted to call for help from any other higher being. Nevertheless, it was extremely risky, but in that moment, it was his only hope, and so he grasped it tightly and called out to Adam. And his hope was fulfilled, for Adam saved him. He even informed him about his power and helped him awaken it. Lucian then considered what Adam had said about the trend of the times. Your presence breaks the trend of the times, so changes must be made, and you, Lucian, will be at the center of it all. He had no idea what Adam had planned, but it was certain that it would change everything, steering this era down a different path than one he was familiar with. And he was going to be at the center of it all. That thought made him feel a mixture of apprehension and excitement. Lucian put a halt to his brooding and looked ahead to see the waitress walking towards him. Sir, your firma coffee. She set a cup of coffee next to him and went to bring him the rest of his orders. Lucian sipped the firma coffee, relishing its bittersweet flavor. As he continued to sip his coffee, his mind wandered. He began to recall the cosmos and how magnificent and majestic it was. His food soon showed up, and it was every bit as delicious as had been claimed. After completing it, he paid the bill and tipped the courteous waitress before returning to the villa with the key provided by Adam, deciding that this was enough sightseeing for the day. The villa was in Nobel district of the Kolain. He entered the grand structure after unlocking the entrance with the key. He gave the house a thorough check, then immediately made his way to the master bedroom, which was on the third floor. He entered it and spread his immense spirituality throughout the chamber, sealing it off from the outside world. He also engraved instructions to seal that if there was any anomaly or intrusion into the house, they should immediately notify him. Lucian then put the bags containing new clothes, souvenirs, and other items in the empty cupboard before changing out of his suit and into more comfortable robes. Finally, he sank into his bed with a contented sigh, his eyelids becoming heavy almost immediately, and he didn't fight it, sliding into a blissful embrace of slumber under the twilight of the sun that shone on him through the bedroom window. Next day, the rising sun illuminated Lucian as he walked out of the bathroom with his towel after a warm and relaxing bath. He had a good night's sleep yesterday after so long, which purged all the weariness from him and completely refreshed him. Lucian dressed up and went downstairs to the kitchen, which was on the ground level, along with the living and dining rooms. The kitchen was already filled with all kinds of culinary ingredients and vessels, saving him the trouble. He brewed himself a cup of coffee and grabbed the morning newspaper, taking a seat on the living room sofa. The front page of the newspaper was all about the immaculate moon. It seemed to have caused quite a stir around the world. Astronomers were throwing speculations about it right and left, stirring the masses all the more. Lucian also took note of the date at the top of the newspaper, October 10, 1349. It had already been 5 days since he had transmigrated to the mysterious world. His sole authority also enabled him to perfectly recall all of his memories. This reminded him of Klein Moretti, the main character in The Lord of Mysteries. By this time, he should have left Tingen after stopping the descent of the true creator and settled in Backland, assuming a new identity with a heart set on vengeance. Lucian didn't dwell much on Kolain. Their paths ultimately varied, he just hoped they didn't end up becoming enemies in the end. Then he continued sweeping the pages of the newspaper, reading it in peace while sipping his coffee. As he was on the last page, the doorbell suddenly sounded, capturing his attention. He immediately recalled what Adam had said yesterday about sending someone to teach him the basics of mysticism, which he really needed because, despite all of his powers, he was still a novice when it came to it. Lucian walked towards the door, leaving the folded newspaper and empty cup on the table after sensing no danger. It should probably be them. As he opened the door, he reflected. I wonder who Adam sent. In the foyer stood an old man with golden eyes and white hair. There weren't many wrinkles on his face, and one could still see a glimpse of youth in him. He exuded a distant, scholarly air, which accentuated by the refined suit he wore and the cane he carried. Hello. The old man greeted Lucian politely. I am Hermes. Classes. Hermes was a great teacher and all, but Lucian didn't forget that Hermes was an angel of visionary pathway, so he kept his guard up against him, always keeping his senses sharp for any probing or prying, but Hermes seemed to be only interested in teaching him nothing more and nothing less. To be honest, Hermes was the best teacher you could find to teach about mysticism. He literally created an extraordinary language, ancient Hermes, back in the second epic that is still used by all Beyonders to this day. It could almost be considered the official language of the extraordinary world. Hermes taught him the languages of the world, both extraordinary and ordinary, the fundamentals and types of rituals, the levels of the soul, the basics of divine paths, the existence of sealed artifacts, the different worlds and how they intersected, the existence of deities and secret existences. He even discovered Mr. Fool was recorded among the secret existences. Well, the Twilight Hermit Order sure works fast, extraordinary organizations, and so on. Even though Lucian was already familiar with many of the topics covered in class, learning them firsthand was clearly superior to reading about them in fiction. It provided him with a complete and comprehensive understanding and view of the world that he had previously lacked. And Hermes probably should have noticed his foreknowledge on the topics, as Lucian didn't have much trust in his acting ability, but if Hermes really had noticed, he didn't bother to show it. His classes with Hermes were only 2 hours long every morning. This was decided after they discovered his learning abilities were unparalleled, which he attributed to his ascension, and his teacher would leave notes for him at the end of each class in preparation for the next. Those were simple to complete, so he spent the rest of the day carefully experimenting with authorities and also going out and around the Kolain. Just like that, it was October 14th, 5 days since his classes with Hermes began. They were almost done with all of the subjects and topics on the fundamentals of mysticism. Lucian and Hermes were in the study room of the villa. They were seated across from each other at a long table. The dim light of the lamp illuminated the notes spread out in front of Lucian, who was going through them all while Hermes held a novel, reading it through his half-moon glasses that glistened from time to time. While reading the note about the secret organizations, Lucian paused abruptly, his brow furrowed at the addition of a new organization to the list. The members of this organization used tarot cards as their codenames. On October 8th, they made their debut in Backland by killing Lanvius, the swindler who attempted to return the true creator to the world twice. Faith. Mr. Fool. Threat level. To be determined. Lucian looked at the information of the Tarot Club as he once again admired the information-gathering ability of the Twilight Hermit Order, which was the organization that Adam led to control and manipulate the trend of times. With little to no information, they even deduced that the Tarot Club believed in Mr. Fool. What caught your attention? Hermes looked up at his student, adjusting his glasses keenly. The new tarot organization. Lucian answered frankly, placing the note on the table. They are intriguing. That they are. Hermes hummed in agreement, closing his novel and placing it on his lap. At long last, someone decided to form an organization with tarot card codenames. It is written that they believe in a new secret existence known as Mr. Fool. Lucian posed the question. Yes, Hermes nodded, his half-moon glass glistening visibly. It was first mentioned as one of many speculations, but he confirmed it. Adam. Lucian thought, unsurprised. Anyway, Hermes continued, his gaze fixed on the notes on the table. Have you finished? Almost. Lucian nodded, but I have a few questions. What exactly is it? Hermes inquired, resting his chin in his palm. You are the creator of ancient Hermes, Lucian stated, which is said to have originated in the second epoch. He looked at Hermes. So you have been alive since then? Yes, Hermes nodded, his face betraying nothing. If I may ask, what was it like? Lucian inquired, leaning forward in his seat. The Dark Ages. Hermes was silent for a moment, then sighed. How long have you been putting off that question, Lucian? Was I really that obvious? Lucian starched the back of his neck. You should work on your acting. Hermes shook his head. I know I'm terrible in that department. Lucian groaned. Secking his student in this state, Hermes instructed, conquer your emotions, and acting will become much easier for you. Lucian nodded deeply, then hesitantly asked Hermes. Could you teach me more about acting? Hermes contemplatively thrummed his fingers on the armrest of his chair. I will. He finally spoke up. You have potential. Thank you, Luckton said, breathing a sigh of relief inwardly. That was a venture, but he took it since he was once again reminded of the importance of acting by his teacher. Hermes nodded. I will start the acting class later today. So now, are you sure you want to know about the Dark Ages? He asked with a hint of warning in his tone. But Lucian, in his geek mode, was unrelenting. Yes. Where do I even begin? Hermes ruminated. Well, you can't talk about the second epoch without mentioning him. The creator. Lucian supplemented enthusiastically. Yes. Hermes nodded. Though I prefer to address him as the savior. Before his awakening, Earth was dominated by extraordinary creatures, giants, phoenixes, elves, demonic wolves, devils, dragons and vampires. And each of them had a god as their ruler. They separated the world and ruled over it together. As Hermes spoke deeply, an image of a magnificent world ruled by mythical creatures began to form in Langton's mind. He saw a floating city teeming with magnificent dragons. He saw a city of palaces controlled by giants that was perpetually steeped in twilight. He saw a Gothi city brimming with vampires under the crimson moonlight. He saw a realm of spirits governed by phoenixes. He saw a coral palace within the seas of the world, filled with elves. He even saw a mountain immersed in darkness and inhabited by savage, demonic wolves. And they all shared the world, ruling it together. Is this due to Hermes' guidance or my powers of soul that created these pictures? Lucian analyzed the magnificent world filled with mythical creatures in his mind, and then he came to a conclusion. Both soul and mind are truly miraculous. Hermes continued. At the time, the law of the jungle reigned supreme. Power was everything. Without it, you had no control over your destiny. He paused in heavy silence, his gaze somewhere far away, as if trying to look back in time. That was not a dark epoch for those mythical creatures, but for humanity. We were helpless and weak without a god to lead and protect us, and so we were enslaved and treated as livestock by the mythical creatures. The magnificent world in Lucian's mind began to unravel, revealing a different, darker side to itself. He witnessed the mythical creatures capturing humans. Mankind attempted to resist, but their efforts were ultimately futile in the face of such extraordinary power. They were enslaved as livestock, to be played with, eaten by, and preyed on by those repugnant and disgusting creatures. It led us to take extreme measures to gain power. You see, at that time, there were no pathway sequences or potions, so we had to make do. We tried to directly combine with the extraordinarily characteristic. Only a few succeeded, and the rest lost control and died. Lucian pressed his lips together into a thin line as he saw humans experimenting with the extraordinary characteristics and subsequent results. You were among them. He returned his attention to Hermes, finding it surreal that this refined and erudite gentleman seated before him had gone through all of that pain and hardship. And I succeeded. Hermes sighed deeply. With power in hand, we attempted to liberate mankind, but our hopes for liberty were dashed when the gods themselves stood in our way. In the face of them, our abilities became meaningless. Just when we thought all hope was lost, he the savior awoke. Lucian saw a hazy figure raise his hand, which was holding a cross, and declare, "Let there be light." And immediately, everything was illuminated, and within one, mythical creatures began to fall one by one and melt into nothingness. "The Creator," Lucian whispered. "The Creator," Hermes echoed. "Illuminated our dark world with his light," he continued, telling Lucian about how the Creator waged war against all the ancient gods and liberated humanity. Lucian listened, his mind racing with images of a glorious and brutal war for liberty and freedom. His attentive face lit by the dim light of the lamp. At the same time, inside the astral world, which was even more abstract than the spirit world and appeared to contain all of the authorities and symbolism of the universe, were the divine kingdoms, each embodying the authorities held by the gods. They were resting on what appeared to be a cracked barrier, attempting to support and reinforce it in order to keep it from cracking further. Among them was a divine kingdom engulfed in endless and silent darkness, filled with moonflowers and vanilla. It was graced by a divine woman reclining under a luminous tree, surrounded by peacefully sleeping souls. She was breathtaking and graceful, dressed in a layered black gown with countless sparkling specks of radiance like stars. There was a circular radiance under her head resembling the moon. She was the Evernight goddess, the Lady of Crimson, the bane of demonic wolves, the Empress of misfortune and horror, the mother of concealment, and ultimately, she was none other than Amanises. Ever since she became a god, Amanises rarely had fluctuations of emotion that broke her serenity, but now, her peaceful countenance was tarnished by a frown. "The Reaper," the Evernight goddess whispered silently, her dark eyes reflecting the southern continent. "Regrets. Amanises has been focused on the earth since last week, looking for the source of the disturbance that caused the white moon to appear. The outer gods had created quite a stir at the time, throwing the astral world on their side into chaos. To prevent the chaos from affecting the barrier, she and other gods had to completely support it with their authorities. It was what amounted to the problem she now faced. She was forced to completely concentrate on the barrier at the time, which left her no time to observe the earth and find the source that drew the attention of the outer gods. She couldn't find the source even after everything had calmed down. Someone had hidden them, or they were powerful enough to hide from her gaze. Either possibility was troubling. To be honest, something like this would not normally have disturbed her tranquility, but she intuitively felt what happened that day would change and affect everything, including her. And she trusted her intuition because intuitions were anything but ordinary at her level. And there was another reason. She wielded the authority of misfortune, which elevated her intuitions to the level of premonitions. As a result, she concentrated on locating the source. She considered the first option because it seemed more plausible than the second. She, attempting to deduce who could have hidden the source from her, she immediately ruled out the gods in the astral world, narrowing the list of suspects to the true Creator, the only God left on earth, but he was still very much sealed within the forsaken land of gods which brought her to the King of Angels. Only one of them had the power to hide something from her, the Mother of Concealment, without leaving any traces. Adam, the Angel of Imagination. If it was truly him, this situation was bound to become complicated to the point where even gods like her needed to be cautious and vigilant in their actions. There were numerous occasions in history when Adam stood up to gods and emerged unscathed. At one point, he even managed to suppress all of them, using Solomon, the Black Emperor. Amanises always knew that there was more to Adam than meets the eye, and her relationship with him was also complicated. This situation was truly troubling. And just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. Since the white moon, the forces of the outer gods have been very active throughout the southern continent, looking for someone named the Reaper. It didn't take much for her to connect the dots and conclude that the Reaper was the source. In the world of mythicism, honorifics and titles were very symbolic, and the fact that the outer gods themselves bestowed a title on the source added to the symbolism and importance. The Reaper clearly represented death and the end. This made Amanises somber because before her was information about someone or something that may potentially affect her path and her plans to become eternal darkness. And she still had no idea who they were. The Evernight goddess rubbed her temples, her heart troubled as she remembered everything about the source and began numerous speculations on it, to the point where she began to suspect whether or not a Sephiroth was involved. But she soon stopped brooding and gathered herself, bringing her heart back to peace. There was no point in worrying herself in this way. Whoever the source was, she would find out everything about them since she didn't want to take any chances with her path. Amanises ultimately made the decision that she had been putting off, but the situation had progressed to the point where she had no choice but to go through with it. She first sent an oracle down to her angels, instructing them to investigate the Reaper and report back to her immediately if any leads were discovered. Then, her form began to change. A pair of dark fur-covered arms sprang from her ribs and waist. Among the 6 hands, a crimson moon appeared in 2 of them, an invisible fog appeared in the next, and the last was empty and silence. Amanises had taken her mythical creature form, summoning her uniquenesses. She no longer restrained her authorities, completely unleashing them and entering her most powerful state. The Evernight goddess decided to completely unleash her authorities in a bid to find the source, holding nothing back. Her divine figure was shrouded in silent darkness blended with ethereal rays of the crimson moon as an eerie and terrifying aura emerged from her. She looked down, her piercing gaze passing through her kingdom and landing on the world. And beneath it, all secrets and concealments began to unravel like theater curtains, revealing her the truths of the world as it was. October 17, 1349. Kolain, East Biome, the southern continent. The stars have become awfully bright the last few nights. Lucian looked up at the night sky. At twilight, the sun was also shimmering with lost brilliance. Perhaps it was his imagination, but he had the impression that both night and dusk had come alive in the previous few days. Is it them? He wondered, a far-fetched but plausible hypothesis. Lucian, Hermes called, jolting him out of his reverie. They were standing in the foyer of his villa under the bright shimmer of stars. Their classes were completed today, both the mysticism and acting ones. He was grateful to Hermes, for he not only taught him on those subjects but also went out of his way to satisfy his immense curiosity and ensure that he had become a master in them. And he actually enjoyed the classes with Hermes, unlike those in his previous life. All in all, Hermes was a great teacher to him, despite the short time they spent together. And Hermes was leaving now. Lucian felt a pang in his heart. Teacher, he answered. The key, Hermes stated, that he bestowed upon you. Yes, Lucian inquired. It will lead you back to Corpse Cathedral, Hermes revealed. Lucian hummed, his heart racing at the prospect of the future in the Corpse Cathedral. Good luck. Lucian. Hermes patted his shoulders and returned his gaze to the bright stars in the night sky. I have a feeling you'll need every last bit of it for your future. Lucian looked up at the night sky, his face lit up by the stars. Do you believe I can succeed? He ventured forth. Hermes fixed his gaze on his student. All I can say is never give up hope, Lucian. He spoke softly. I won't. Lucian made a promise both to his teacher and to himself. He then smfied and continued. Take care, teacher. If there is anything, don't hesitate to summon my messenger. Yes, he has a messenger now. He wasn't lying when he said he was experimenting with the authorities. He used it to create an owl spirit to serve as his messenger. He named him Merlin, and boy, was he an enthusiastic bird, always wanting affirmation and attention. Hermes nodded, remembering the owl who occasionally swooped into their classes to join them. Tell Merlin of my départ. You can tell him yourself. Lucian interrupted with a sigh, as a white owl emerged and landed enthusiastically on his shoulders, after finishing the daily expedition into the spirit world. Then he hooted questionably on his shoulders, looking in between Lucian and Hermes. Goodbye, Merlin. Hermes smiled as he waved his hand at his bird. Merlin seemed to understand the situation as he hooted loudly and waved his wing at Hermes. What is he saving? Hermes asked Lucian. Goodbye, old man, Lucian said, twitching his lips. Hermes laughed lightly. I thought so. He then continued, his laughter fading away into a sigh. Anyway, I will be off now, Lucian. Take care, teacher. Lucian emphasized as he watched Hermes turn and walk away to the villa's gate, but in the middle, he stopped and looked back at Lucian. A last piece of advice from the old man, don't leave any regrets in life. Then he disappeared, fading away into dreams of the world. Lucian silently looked ahead for a moment, even Merlin remained still, not disturbing him. Eventually, he looked down at the hand, which had a key, in silence. Merlin gave the key a cursory glance before hooting and lightly flapping his wings. No, Merlin. Lucian shook his head. This has to wait, there is something I need to do first. He said, his mind flashing with the last words of his teacher. Later that night, Lucian stood silently in front of an orphanage under the crimson moon, taking a deep breath before raising his hand and ringing the bell. He soon heard grumblings from behind the door. Who is it? Coming this late at night and disturbing this old woman's sleep. The door swung open, revealing an elderly woman in a nightgown, her hair disheveled, and her countenance worn as if she had just awoken from a deep sleep, but the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. Lucian smiled broadly. I am back, matron. Lucian. The old lady's eyes widened immediately, then hazed as she hugged him. Where did you go all these days? You had everybody worried. Oh, I doubt that. Lucian hugged his matron, Margaret. She was the only one in the Brendan that truly cared for his previous self. Being sarcastic, are we? Margaret chided him, getting out of his embrace. Anyway, come on in. The nights are getting awfully cold these past few days. Lucian and Margaret entered the orphanage, making their way into the living room, where they sat on the chairs, facing each other. The matron poured him a glass of water and passed it to Lucian. I am sorry, Lucian suddenly said, looking at the glass in silence. What happened, child? Margaret asked. A lot, Lucian answered heavily. You are worrying me, Margaret said with concern. Don't be. I am fine, Lucian shook his head. You don't look fine to me, Lucian. Margaret retorted. Lucian sighed. I am leaving, matron. The worry in Margaret's grave deepened. Lucian, she said solemnly. Tell me the truth, what happened? Did you get yourself into any trouble? Kinda, Lucian chuckled wryly. But nothing I can't handle, he continued, recognizing her concern. I understand your concerns, matron, but this is something I must face alone. Oh, child, Margaret cried, resting her head on her palm. I told you to always be careful and cautious. But when did you ever listen? She ranted on. Lucian stood up and hugged his patron as she poured out all of her worries while patting her back gently. Enough. Margaret gathered herself and huffed. Let go of this old woman now. Lucian obliged with a slight chuckle. Margaret looked at Lucian. Will you be fine? I will be. Lucian emphasized. Promise me. Margaret pressed. I promise. Lucian said. Don't worry yourself. I am not a child anymore. I know. Margaret nodded. Whatever has happened to you has changed you. You have grown. I can see it, but still. She trailed off with a heavy sigh. Lucian held her hands in his, reassuring her silently. Margaret patted his hands, her eyes brimming with tears. Is this the last time? No. Lucian shook his head. If anything happens, just call my name and I will be here. Margaret hummed, not questioning his words. Then she looked at him in the eyes. Good luck, Lucian. Lucian gazed back at Brendan in heavy silence as the sun slowly rose from the horizon, illuminating his figure in golden hues. On his shoulder, Merlin emerged. The owl seemed to perceive Lucian's distress and hooted gently, as though attempting to reassure him. Well, Lucian said, patting his feathery head and shifting his gaze to the key in his hand, you're correct in one respect. This is my new beginning, he added, waking towards the sun. Without any regrets. Emperor. Corpse Cathedral was still the same. The bones of gods will greet you everywhere you look. It should have been as creepy and eerie as hell. After all, he was basically in what could be considered the graveyard of gods, but it was filled with holiness and sacredness, such a contradiction in and of itself. On second thought, Lucian remembered that the authorities of Visionary had the ability to give life to anything virtual or material. Adam used this ability to capture Kolain in the original book by giving life to his marionette, which became German Sparrow. German stabbed Kolain with a wooden stake, sealing all of his power, and sent him to the corpse cathedral, and that should include corpses among its categories. So, could Adam grant life to the corpses of the gods? What a frightening prospect. Lucian pondered with trepidation. He understood that, as he put it, this prospect would not be simple. There should be limitations and restrictions to this power because Adam was only a king of angels for now. Yet, it only served to demonstrate how terrifying Adam was. Speaking of Adam, he was still praying to the cross as Lucian sat in an uncomfortable silence on the front row of Corpse Cathedral. For the record, waiting was never his strong suit. He'd been in his fair share of queues in his previous life, and they were terrible to be in, and the fact that what awaited him was his future path didn't help him at all. Lucian forced himself to concentrate on something else in order to calm his nerves. The first thing that came to mind was the recent changes in the time of night and dusk. The stars were brighter than ever before, and the twilight at sunset was blazing to the point where it seemed to engulf the world in lost brilliance. Such changes could be seen not only in Kolain but all over the world. Even mortals began to notice the oddity of the situation. Merlin and a few other spirits he had created had been carefully communicating with creatures of the spirit world, gathering information for him about the general state of the planet. He intended to expand this into a full-fledged information-gathering network, but that was for another time. Let's get back to the point. The changes of night and dusk. Could it be because of the actions of the Evernight goddess and the god of combat? Did they already manage to deduce clues to his existence? And were they now searching for him? Too many questions and assumptions weighed heavily on his mind. But he pushed it all aside for the time being as he watched Adam finish his prayer to himself. Was this some sort of acting, or was the ancient sun god that narcissistic? And rise from the genuflecting position, his hand reaching for the silver cross. Lucian was beginning to suspect that cross was special, perhaps the visionary uniqueness, and gently holding it. Lucian paused his brooding and kept his senses sharp and clear, raising his guard against Adam as he approached, even though he doubted it would help much, but it did soothe his paranoia. If Adam had noticed his guarded actions, he didn't bother to say anything, instead sitting next to Lucian and looking ahead at the cross. You should have noticed it. He posed it as more of a question than a statement. Lucian was unsurprised, though a little concerned about how he understood exactly what Adam was implying. Yes, I've agreed, then ventured. Do the changes of night and dusk have anything to do with me? Yes, Adam confirmed it, his heart sinking. Amanises and Bodial have been actively looking for volume. Have they discovered anything? Lucian pressed tentatively. Adam didn't answer. Instead, he revealed. Your concealment is only temporary. The gods are bound to eventually find out about your existence. Lucian understood that this was inevitable. His existence was bound to bring changes, and even Adam with all his might couldn't continue to keep him in concealment. The real question now was whether he was prepared to face the world that awaited him. Lucian closed his eyes for a moment of reckoning silence, then firmly opened them. I am ready. Adam hummed faintly before raising his hand and grabbing something from nowhere. It was a gray stone slab with an eerie aura to it. Its surface was covered in mottled engravings. And those engravings faintly looked like words that seemed like the source of all languages. Lucian immediately knew what it was, the second blasphemy slate. The Angel of Imagination handed the slate to Lucian and pointed to a section that detailed potion formulas and sequences. Lucian examined it closely and discovered that Adam was pointing to the death pathway, specifically the first two sequences. Sequence 1, Pale Emperor. Potion formula. Main ingredients. 1 Pate Emperor characteristic. Ritual. 1 Build an empire, linking your name to the title of emperor and making it common knowledge among the populace. 2. Conquer 100,000 spirits and integrate them into your empire. 3. Direct all your citizens, both living and dead, to gather and focus on a major event. 4. Finally, as the event reaches its peak, drink the Sequence 1 potion. Sequence D, Death, Eternal Sleeper. Potion Formula. Main ingredient. All 3 Beander characteristics corresponding to Pale Emperor and the uniqueness of the death pathway. Ritual. Construct an underworld and make it the final resting place for souls. To construct an empire and an underworld. Lucian squinted, his brow furrowed. Well, it's certainly suitable for the sequence names. He was troubled by the rituals aside from the underworld. Building an empire was no easy task in and of itself. The complexities, problems, and difficulties involved in this endeavor may make anyone's head spin. And the fact that this was the world of the Lord of Mysteries makes this all the more complicated and difficult. Lucian kept his troubling thoughts at bay in order to address the elephant in the cathedral. Even though he had already made an assumption, he sought confirmation from Adam. So I'm going straight to Pale Emperor. Yes, Adam nodded. It's best if you first reach Pale Emperor before attempting godhood. You may already be an archangel wielding authority, but apotheosis is a whole different story, he warned. A single problem or blunder could derail everything you've worked so hard for. Lucian nodded solemnly, fully aware of the dangers of the apotheosis ritual. He had no fantasies. He knew he'd fail if he attempted godhood in his current state. It was better to be cautious and take things slowly rather than rushing in. The Reaper looked at his limped eyes. There's something else. Will the madness in the characteristics of Pale Emperor infect me if I try to combine with it? Probably. Adam said, his tone left much to be desired. You do not know. Lucian blinked, concluding. Yes. Adam admitted frankly. I do not know. Lucian, you're on an unknown path, so tell me now if you're still as ready as you said. Lucian was unnerved, both by the mysteries and unknowns that lay ahead of him and by Adam, who was putting his resolve to the test. But he didn't give in, his heart was still set on his hopes and dreams. I am. Lucian responded with finality in his eyes. I chose this path, and I want to see it through. Your words are admirable. Adam nodded, taking the blasphemy slate. But let's see if you can back it up with results. So how you intend to deal with the potential madness. The ritual of the Pale Emperor. Lucian immediately told Adam the plan he had just devised. It will provide me with anchors to resist the madness. Adam gently nodded. It will indeed grant you enough anchors to deal with the problems of madness. However, becoming a ruler of an empire is easier said than done, isn't it? Emperor. Lucian was truly stumped. By all accounts, the Pale Emperor ritual was difficult. His old self would never have imagined himself building an empire in his wildest dreams. To be honest, he didn't even know where to begin. Adam seemed to take pity on Lucian, for he guided him. Take a look around you. You are on a continent that has been invaded and colonized by foreigners in the name of order, but all they have done is exploit and worsen the situation. Humans here have been oppressed and treated worse than livestock, but they still yearn for Lt. For freedom, for salvation, to the point that they would sacrifice their lives for it, so hear their prayers and grant them, Lucian. As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, his mind clicked, revealing a chilling truth. You actually want to. Lucian stared wide-eyed at Adam. You are perceptive. Adam praised Lucian with a gentle smile. Maybe you really do have a chance against Amanises. Lucian's lips twitched, but he ventured forth with his conclusion. You want me to become Emperor of Biam, which is only possible if the southern continent is liberated from colonialism. Loan Kingdom and Intis Republic will not be happy about that, especially Loan. George Augustus III, King of Loan Kingdom, is attempting to become the Black Emperor, but the first requirement for its apotheosis ritual is to be an emperor of your own country, but Loan is under constitutional monarchy, so the king is merely a figurehead for the government, not their emperor. So Augustus must have chosen a different path, one that led him to the Loan colonies on the southern continent. He saw an opportunity and seized it, declaring himself Emperor of Biam and assuming direct control of the colonies, thus satisfying the requirement. Go on, Adam encouraged. Lucian went on, his tone thick with heaviness. Now, let's say, you have me, he pointed to himself. Who wants to liberate the southern continent, which will not only offend the governments of Intis and Loan but will also deprive Augustus of the title of emperor and ruin the ritual he worked so hard on. Ultimately, what do you think will happen then? A war. Adam prophesied, his gaze somewhere far away. A war that sweeps the entire world. Father. A war. Adam prophesied, his gaze somewhere far away. A war that sweeps the entire world. A world war. Adam intended to use him to spark a world war. The revelation weighed heavily on Lucian. The horrors of world wars rushed across his mind, the colossal numbers of people lost in both world wars and how devastated the world was left in their wake. All of this devastation occurred in a world devoid of supernatural power, but this was a world teeming with extraordinary powers. Even God's a world war here would result in unimaginable destruction and death. To be honest, Lucian understood that this was more of a world of madness than a world of mysteries. You simply cannot avoid getting your hands dirty if you want to advance in this world. He was aware of this and had even prepared himself for it, but still starting a world war. Lucian took a deep breath to calm himself, but his expression remained grim. He just hoped that he didn't lose himself in the end. Grabbing onto that tightly, Lucian turned to face Adam and declared solemnly, "I will liberate the southern continent and become the emperor of Biam." A heavy sigh brimming with emotions escaped his lips as he finished. Adam held the silver cross in his hand. "Good," he said gently. "Now, how are you going to accomplish it?" Lucian pressed down his chaotic emotions and ventured. "The remnants of death." Adam nodded, taking over from him. After the fall of Salinger and the collapse of the Balaam Empire, the Eggers family founded a new organization, the Numinous Episcopet, with the goal of resurrecting the death. They have survived to this day and continue to wield enormous power over the southern continent, to the point where even Orthodox Church efforts to root them out have completely failed. Lucian suddenly realized, they should have a characteristic of Pale Emperor. Not one, but two. Adam corrected. They also possess the uniqueness of the death pathway. Uniqueness? Lucian said, thoroughly surprised. Salinger made certain that if he fell in the end. Adam explained. His characteristics and uniqueness didn't fall into foreign hands. But Evernight Goddess and God of Combat? Lucian inquired, perplexed. How did they allow something like this to happen right under their noses? They had no choice, Adam explained, holding his silver cross. At the end of the fourth epoch, the seven gods had already reached an alliance to deal with the madness of Salinger and the problem of the breaking barrier. So, if either of them had tried to obtain the uniqueness and characteristics of the death pathway after Salinger's fall, the alliance of gods would have collapsed immediately, resulting in a new war of gods, which neither of them wanted given the state of the world. And there was also the fact that they decided to wait for the oldest one's will to weaken further before going after the death pathway, he finished. That's why they let it happen. Is that so? Lucian nodded, feeling enlightened. It seemed even by becoming God won't allow to escape the politics and its intricacies. So, the Numinous Episcopate went forward with the goal of reviving death. The Reaper then inquired, his mind flashing with the details of the organization of death. They did, but there were issues. Adam agreed with a hum. At first, the Numinous Episcopate was united in their goal, but they eventually split into two factions after the angels who led the Origination Halter and Sla Palenque Eggers had a falling out over the reviving death. Halter wanted to go through with it completely, but Sia had a change of heart and decided to rather wait for the Son of Death to return. Lucian processed the information, gaining a new understanding of the Numinous Episcopate. The Artificial Death Project, he ventured. That was their plan. Yes. Adam nodded. They took inspiration from the situation of the Hidden Sage. Though they failed to revive death, the Numinous Episcopate managed to create an artificial god in his life. They brought death uniqueness to life. Lucian sucked in a deep breath. Partially, Adam corrected. The hermic uniqueness was corrupted by a Sephiroth the knowledge more and became anthropomorphy, turning completely into a living being, but the Numinous Episcopate lacked that ability, so all they could do was use faith to grant some consciousness to the death uniqueness. It couldn't even be considered a living being, only something that follows basic instincts. Lucian blinked in shock at Adam, who was simply revealing such a shocking truth in between his words. So that was the secret behind the origin of Hidden Sage. A puppet of Sephiroth. Well, this does explain the passive attitude of the god of steam and machinery towards Hidden Sage, but wasn't it also said that he was involved in the birth of Hidden Sage? What role exactly did the god of steam and machinery play in it? The curious part of his mind wanted to ask Adam about it all, but the rational part of his mind stopped him, bringing his focus back to his future. Lucian took a deep breath and peered at Adam. So, according to your script, I should ultimately try to seize control of the Numinous Episcopet. Adam spoke warmly. It's the best path ahead of you. By seizing control of the Numinous Episcopet, which still wields power over the southern continent and its people, you will have a real chance of becoming Emperor of Byam and ascending to godhood. But, Lucian inquired, a little hesitantly, will they accept me? Byam culture values lineage and heritage, and I am all but an outsider to them. Who said you were an outsider? Adati calmly dropped a bomb on Lucian. What do you mean? Lucian's pupils dilated. Lucian, your father. Adam guided. Recall him. Lucian never gave much thought to his father, even though his previous self held some resentment and yearning towards him. With him, though, it waned into indifference and apathy. Now, he recalled him, his earliest memories flowing formlessly through his mind, but only one remained in the end, coalescing to form a scene. It depicted his father dropping his baby self off at the gate of the orphanage with hesitancy and pain, as well as a bit of grim resolution. Lucian focused immediately on his father's face, which was illuminated by the golden light of the sun. He had bronze skin, an average height and build, and gentle facial features. His eyes were the most noticeable feature of him, as if they held the vicissitudes of life itself. It was an understatement to say Lucian was stunned, looking at the face of his father. He couldn't be wrong, this was Isaac Eggers. Oh, my God. Lucian whispered silently, his hands over his face. My father is Isaac Eggers. Aside from Isaac, you are the last remaining direct descendant of death in the world. Adam declared. The throne of Byam belongs to you by birthright. Lucian. He paused, and Lucian knew what was in store for him. Eggers. Lucian Eggers. Lucian's emotions were on a roller coaster, going up and down as he spoke with a tremor. This is. He paused. Too coincidental. Truly, nothing in the world happens without a reason. Adam stated calmly, confirming his fears. Whoever or whatever brought you into this world wanted you to have an easy start. Who could it be? Lupton wondered aloud. Adam strangely remained silent, his gaze fixed on the cross on the altar. Lucian eventually forced himself to calm down. He didn't allow himself to be overly concerned because there was no point. Whoever was responsible for his reincarnation was beyond his current self's comprehension. All he could do was deal with it as it came, a risky strategy, that's for sure, but it was the only one he had at the time. Lucian then took a deep breath and looked at Adam, who was staring silently at the cross. He could tell Adam didn't know the answer to his question, or maybe he had some clues but chose not to tell him. In any case, he wasn't going to delve deeper into the subject to avoid any potential extensional crisis. Felling his gaze, Adam turned to Lucian. You are truly adaptive. Most wouldn't have been able to pull themselves together this fast if they were in your situation. Lucian chuckled wryly at his praise, his mind flashing with memories of time when he fought against cancer, but he immediately pushed them to the back of his mind. You've got to do what you've got to do to survive. You are suppressing much within yourself, Lucian. Adam observed Lucian keenly. I know, Lucian shook his head forlornly. I will see to it. Adam didn't press, rather, he faintly hummed as he stood up and walked in front of him. I have scheduled a meeting with Santa Palenque Eggers for you tomorrow. She is the leader of the royal faction of the Numinous Episcopet, so she will gladly hear your case. Lucian nodded, understanding the information between his words. The artificial death faction of Numinous Episcopet won't be that happy about his existence. He also understood their meeting was coming to an end, so he stood up from his seat and looked ahead at Adam. Tomorrow your path begins, the angel of imagination proclaimed prophetically. Tomorrow, you change the world. And I can hardly wait. Lucian smiled, his tone a mix of sarcasm and somberness. I will be off now. He nodded gratefully to Adam, but then something occurred to him. The last Pale Emperor characteristic? He inquired of Adam. Find it yourself. Adam instructed. Prove your resolve with results, Lucian Eggers. Lucian couldn't have asked for anything more. He knew it was time to stand on his own 2 feet and prove himself. His chaotic emotions calmed down as he made that decision, and he nodded one last time to Adam before turning and making his way out of the corpse cathedral in firm steps. Later that day, Kolain, East Biome. Lucian sat alone on the golden sand of the beach, his face aglow with the last orange rays before the sun beckoned the stars. He was looking at the horizon, where the sky and sea met. The color was almost black. The setting sun was a rich crimson color, almost as if dyed in blood, illuminating the entire world in the brilliance of twilight. The red sun appeared to be sinking into the water like a live ember, and the heat caused the air around it to shimmer. In serenity, Lucian was brooding about a lot of things, from something as mundane as the sea trade of Kolain to something as personal as his father to something as powerful as the last Pale Emperor characteristic. His thoughts were jumbled, but he tried to sort them out. First, the sea trade of Kolain, the capital city of East Biome, was a coastal city. Almost all sea trade between the south and north continents passes through here. This was why Kolain was considered the gateway to the southern continent. Second, his father, who turned out to be none other than Isaac Eggers. To be honest, he didn't know how to feel about this. But nevertheless, by now, his father should have begun to retrieve his memories and gone out to learn more about his past. Will he eventually remember him as well? Finally, the last Pale Emperor characteristic, he was focused on finding it right now, pushing aside the emotions that arose when he remembered his father. He began by recalling all of his knowledge of the plot, carefully analyzing everything related to death in it. Even in the world of mysteries, foreknowledge was still somewhat advantageous. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to information about a future event, which caused his eyes to narrow in scrutiny for a moment before a wide smile plastered across his lips, for he had just discovered who possessed the last Pale Emperor characteristic. Bernardet Gustav. Lucian whispered under his breath. Failure. Palenque Eggers was many things, but a betrayer she was not. Nonetheless, she had heard what they call, behind her back, when they thought no one could hear them in the comfort of the shadows. Blasphemer. Traitor. Deceiver. Kinslayer. She should tell you that these naked and undraped comments had no effect on her, but it would be a lie, for she bore these words in her heart. But did she regret any of her choices that led her to this moment? No, she never did. Sia had lived a long life, with millennia of memories brimming her mind. From the War of Gods to the fall of 4 emperors, from the collapse of the Biome Empire to the anarchy that followed, from the arrival of Russell to the colonization of the southern continent, from the birth of an artificial god to the persecution of her people, she had seen it all. Now the real question was, what did she do in any of the events that shaped the era? Nothing. However, she was at the level of someone who could lead Orthodox churches and secret organizations, someone who could be considered the pinnacle of the extraordinary world for less informed beings, and someone whose name could be sung in tales and legends. Ultimately, she was a none other than a grounded angel. Yet Sia felt utterly powerless. The longer she lived, the more she realized her insignificance. She couldn't do anything but comply in the face of trends of times, and it's not like she didn't try. Rather, she tried everything she could to make a big change to the stage, yet every time she failed. And her greatest faller against the trend was when that wretched Emperor Russell discovered a new and safe sea route to her land, ushering in the colonial era. Sia tried to stop them, and even Hater, the insufferable man, supported her plans. She wanted to remind the Northerners of the history they had forgotten, of what happened when the southern and northern continents collided, and of how death would have destroyed the entire northern continent if it hadn't been for the 7 gods. She wanted to remind them of the pale disaster, the wrath of Biome. Sia Palenque Eggers railed the entire might of the Numinous Episcopate against the northern countries that were attempting to colonize the southern continent, but what she ultimately faced was the trend of the times, which now came in the form of the Beyonders of the so-called Orthodox churches. The seven gods must have noticed her actions, so they dispatched their churches to pursue her and her organization, hoping to take advantage of the opportunity to root them out. They, unsurprisingly, failed. This result was too obvious for her. After all, unlike the Orthodox churches, which were reducing their forces to a bare minimum after the beginning of the Fifth Epoch, she and Hayter had always focused on strengthening and expanding their organization, to the point where they were on the verge of regaining the might the Eggers family had in the Fourth Epoch. They would have done so by the turn of the century if it weren't for the constant conflict and chaos on the southern continent. In any case, the war between the Numinous Episcopate and the Orthodox churches allowed the northern countries to colonize the southern continent right under her nose. Even though Sia had won the conflict with the Orthodox churches, she had failed her people, her empire, her continent, and her home once again. She could even do nothing to the northerners anymore, as she knew if her organization pushed them too hard, what awaited her was a divine punishment from the gods. There was a limit to the patience and tolerance of gods, and she didn't dare try to test it. Even if she didn't want to. Halter did. He was, as always, daring and reckless, to the point where she sometimes wondered how he survived to become an angel. Halter was the leader of the Artificial Death faction. Though they never saw eye to eye from the start, the dire situation following the end of the Fourth Epoch forced them to put aside their differences and band together to form the Numinous Episcopate in order to pull together what was left. At first, their goals were similar, to resurrect death. But, as the years passed, Sia realized how pointless her efforts were. It was dubbed the Artificial Death Project by Hayter. He desired to bring uniqueness to life and resurrect death through it. The existence of the Hidden Sage inspired him to devise this plan. But Hidden Sage was surrounded by mysteries and unknowns. No angel clearly knows how the hermit uniqueness came to life, and there was also the fact that the Evernight goddess and god of combat would not sit back and watch as they attempted to resurrect death. All in all, this was a foolish and dangerous endeavor. But Hayter clearly believed otherwise. He was so obsessed with death that he wanted to proceed with the Artificial Death Project despite the risks and uncertainties. Sta decided to oppose Halter after much deliberation in order to put an end to his folly. In return, she was called a betrayer and a blasphemer in front of all. They soon fell out, dividing the Numinous Episcopate into two factions. Hatter went ahead with his plan, and guess what? He failed spectacularly. Even he was affected and injured by it, forcing him to sleep for years to recover. All that came out of his plan was an artificial god that couldn't even be considered a living being, a shell of what was death, a mere fantasy of a zealot. But, as you might expect have guessed, even failure didn't deter that insufferable man, who was still determined to complete his plan one way or another. All the while, Sia was focused on finding the Son of Death, having decided to bet on him. She recognized that if anyone had a greater chance of restoring Byam to its former glory, it was him. After all, he was once their emperor, ruling them in death's place. The man in question was Isaac Eggers. Her relationship with him was fine, but she never really got to know him because of the chaos of the Fourth Epoch. Everyone, from mortals to gods, was drawn into the whirlpool of war in that CRA. They already had a lot on their plates, so socializing was the last thing on their minds. Isaac even pursued death to confront the Blood Emperor, who was a mad god, but the most incredible thing was that he lived to tell the tale. After that, he became a legend among the Byam, revered by their people. Unfortunately, all legends must come to an end, and Isaac was no exception. After the fall of death and the collapse of the Byam Empire, he inexplicably vanished without a trace. Now, Sta was determined to resurrect the long-forgotten legend, but she couldn't find Isaac. There was no sign of Isaac Eggers, no matter how much she searched and scoured the world. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Sia, on the other hand, didn't believe in coincidences. Someone or something was blocking her path to Isaac. Whoever they were, they had enough power to keep him hidden from her, but she didn't give up hope, determined to find Isaac no matter what. As the years passed, the situation on the southern continent worsened. Loan, Intis, and Fasak have been constantly fighting for more power in the colonies. The forces of the outer gods also emerged, pouring even more oil into the chaotic fire and enabling it to rage throughout the southern continent. Still, Sia had found no leads on Azek Eggers, and just when she thought she was about to fail again, a message from that organization was delivered directly to her. She was aware of the Twilight Hermit Order, how they were controlling the trend of the times, and even who was leading it. After all, only Adam, the angel of imagination, had the power and might to influence the path of the entire world, right under the noses of the seven gods. To be honest, she despised that organization and everything it stood for because it reminded her of how insignificant she was in the grand scheme of things. But the content of the message they delivered forced her to set aside her reservations and focus on it solemnly, as it revealed the existence of another direct descendant of death who was seeking her audience. She was skeptical and cautious at first, because all direct descendants of death except Azek died by the end of the fourth epoch, but she ultimately decided to keep an open mind and hear his case, despite being fully aware of the risks involved. After all, the meeting had been arranged by the Twilight Hermit Order, possibly even him, but she was desperate. Sia Palenque Eggers did not want to fail again. That's how she ended up here, alone, on October 19, 1349, in front of a door to a hotel room in Kolain. It would be a lie to say she wasn't surprised by their meeting location, which was far from what she had expected, but the simplicity of it all soothed her heart, and so she raised her hand and knocked on the door, which immediately opened on its own, as if they already knew she was standing outside, but she couldn't sense anything behind the door. Sia entered the room with caution and was greeted by a young man who was handsome in his own right. He had bronze skin, average height, and a chiseled build. And he had a sun-kissed glow about him, which was enhanced by his aura, that was a contradictory mixture of serenity and grimness, but it seemed to strangely suit him all too well, and his silver eyes had that same youthful look that she occasionally reminisced about in her dreams of the past. "Hello," the lad greeted her politely, his voice very distinct, as if he already knew something about you that you yourself didn't. "I am Lucian Eggers. Choice." The ethereal lights of the stars shone brightly in the night sky, as they had all week. This phenomenon inadvertently caused a wave of faith to spread among the general populace of Loan Kingdom, as many believed it was a miracle of the Evernight goddess, who was blessing the mortal world with her grace. This resulted in believers flocking to the churches of Evernight goddess in hope and reverence, but ironically, the most brilliant stars gracing the world were highly concentrated in a single place, and it was not Loan but the Kolain, southern continent, where the religion of Evernight goddess was non-existent. And the light of those bright stars, cascading down into a hotel room window, illuminated the pivotal meeting between Lucian Eggers and Sta Palenque Eggers. Sia sat in a chair in the living room, facing Lucian, who was grabbing two kettles from an eager owl spirit. It was different from other spirits, but she couldn't put her finger on why, despite feeling a strange familiarity with it, and then it flew back into the spirit world. "Coffee or tea, Sia?" Lucian inquired, looking up at her. "Tea," Sia immediately responded. Even though she had become a mythical creature, she didn't mind indulging in some of her previous human needs, and honestly, who could say no to good and soothing tea? Lupton hummed as he poured her a cup of tea, then poured himself a cup of coffee before passing her cup to her. Sia instinctively checked the tea with her senses before taking a sip as she made herself somewhat comfortable in the chair, but not to the point of letting her guard down against Lucian, who at first appeared harmless and gentle, though her opinion of him quickly changed when she couldn't sense anything deeper from him. Mind you, she was an angel of death pathway who knew all about the intricacies of the soul itself, so either Lancian was powerful enough to conceal his secrets from her senses, which she doubted, or someone was assisting him in doing so. In any case, she decided it was best not to relax her guard against him. Finally, Sta broke the silence by asking Lucian in between sips, bringing up the elephant in the room. "So you claim to be a direct descendant of death." "I am not only a direct descendant of death," Lucian corrected calmly, setting his half-finished cup aside. "I am also the son of Azek Figures." Son of Azek Eggers. Sia was shocked, but her countenance remained composed, not betraying her emotions. But Azek Eggers has vanished since the beginning of the 5th epoch, never to be seen again. She subtly probed Lucian for information. What do you mean? Lucian arched his brow. He didn't vanish, he's still very much active in the world. Sia was frustrated by the haphazard information provided to her. The boy was keen, she recognized it, and he must have noticed she was testing him. It was now up to her to make a choice. She could remain subtle and evasive, or she could be frank with him. I didn't know that, she finally admitted, placing her cup on the table as well. Please elaborate. Lucian pressed with sincerity in his eyes, and Sia did the same, informing him of the details of her search for Azek Eggers. After she finished, Lucian nodded, agreeing with her assessment of the situation. Someone is indeed concealing my father from you, he said, his tone knowing. You know who it is? Sia could tell by his tone. I have a guess. Lucian nodded. But I am sure you are not going to like it. Try me. Sta pushed on despite feeling fear rise in her pits of her stomach. Lucian shifted in his seat, pointing through the window at the brightest stars in the night sky. Evernight goddess. Lucian was correct. Sia didn't like his guess one bit. She hoped this was false, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized Lucian's guess was plausible, and that terrified her. The Evernight goddess was the most powerful god on earth, aside from the true creator. Sta, as a survivor of the 4th epoch, understood a lot about gods and their affairs. And she could tell you a long list of things and reasons to prove how terrifying Evernight goddess was, but one event should ultimately suffice. By the end of the War of 4 Emperors, the Night Emperor had betrayed the 7 gods and done massive damage to their troops. In retaliation, the Evernight goddess, herself, entered the battlefield to confront the Night Emperor and slew him. Sia could clearly remember how the laws and rules of the world changed and crumbled with the fall of the Night Emperor. That scene was truly horrible to witness, yet the Evernight goddess slew the deity who was keeping it all together single-handedly. That same terrifying divine being was now blocking her path to Azek. It would be a lie to say she was not terrified or scared, but she was astonished to find that Lucian had a calm countenance. It was either completely honest or the best damn bit of acting she had seen in a long time. Sia reached for the cup and took a sip of tea, which calmed her heart slightly. You want another? Lucian offered. Sia shook her head. You're cool, she observed, looking up at him. Believe me when I say I'm not. Lucian chuckled melancholically. I guess I've gotten too used to it, if you know what I mean. What has this young man been through? Sia thought quietly as she finished her tea. Anyway, I didn't ask your audience to debate my father's condition, but rather to hear my case. Lucian continued. Go on, Sia acknowledged, pulling herself back together. She pushed Azek to the back of her mind for a moment because she was eager to hear what he had to say, and she had a feeling he was going to completely surprise her. I'm sure you still have some reservations about my identity, so. Lucian pricked his finger with a fruit tray knife, allowing a drop of black blood to seep, but instead of falling to the ground, the drop flowed back to the watchant as it healed. You are an angel, Sia was surprised. Ascension to the realm of mythical creatures alters everything about you, including your blood. In the case of Death Pathway, your blood would turn pitch black, carrying the essence of death. Not just an angel. Lucian rose from his seat, and 6 pairs of metallic wings unfolded from behind him, gleaming grimly in the light of the stars. Archangel. Sia leapt from her seat as well. If she had been surprised before, she was now taken back to the point where her emotions were all over her face. She would have known if a Pale Emperor ascended like the rest of the world. The Ascension ritual of the Pale Emperor would have made certain of that. Unlike the Death Council ritual, it could not be hidden at all. How? She managed in the end. That is not the question you should be asking. Lucian merely said so as he retracted his wings. He sat back in his chair, motioning for her to rejoin him. Sia took a deep breath, composing herself again. Then should I have asked, what are your goals? She said sharply as she sat back down. Yes, Lucian encouragedly nodded. Don't you think that will serve both of our interests? Sta pressed her lips together to form a thin line. She had become completely passive in this conversation the moment Lucian revealed himself to be an archangel, but despite her displeasure, she ventured silently, "Let me guess, you want to become the death." "Not only that." Lucian nodded lightly. "I intend to liberate the southern continent and bring back the glory of Balaam." He looked at Santa with sincerity. "And I cannot do this without you and your organization. So what is your choice, Star?" Sia was unsurprised by his dreams. "I know nothing about you, Lucian Eggers," she said it with steel in her voice, refusing to back down in the face of an archangel because this was her home. "Yet you expect me to entrust you with the fate of an entire continent and its people." "I may be surrounded by unknowns for you," Lucian stated, "but I am your best shot. As for my father, his condition is somewhat complicated. Trust me, even if he does return, you will be disappointed." "Trust him." Sia remained silent for a moment, contemplating his words. She could tell from past experiences that even though his words were twisted in his favor, they contained some truth. Then she asked Lucian, meeting his silver eyes. "So you want in to take a leap of faith?" "Faith is everything," Lucian mystically echoed. "After all." Sia allowed her intrusive thoughts to win. "I believe you will be suitable for the paths of mysteries as well." "I believe so as well," Lucian admitted candidly. "I'd make an excellent charlatan." "That's not helping your case at all," Sia said, twitching her lips. "I know." Lucian laughed, then his mirth faded into solemnity. "Jokes aside, let me ask again, what is your choice, Sta Palenque Eggers?" He rose from his seat and approached her, extending his hand. Sta stared at his hand in stillness, her eyes telling of her struggles and emotions, but eventually all that remained was resoluteness. She just hoped she wouldn't come to regret her decisions today. With that, she stood up from her seat and extended her hand to Lucian. Finally, Lucian Eggers and Sia Palenque Eggers shook hands, their resolute eyes fixed on each other. At the same time, as they shook their hands, a faint ripple arose in a river of light with endless tributaries, rolling outward as it grew and grew, scattering the serenity in a roaring wave. Something has happened. Around the world, the long and dark night became colder and chillier, while stars that had been shining brilliantly for the previous week dimmed, returning to their previous state. But for those with keen eyes, there was something new about the stars, a harsh glow that sent shivers down their spines. That was about to change. In the forsaken land of gods, a silver-haired man with 6 pairs of wings opened his troubled eaves, as he had just felt a great disturbance in the river of destiny. "My lord," he began, looking at the shadows, but was cut off by a hoarse voice that reverberated all around him, as if the shadows themselves were speaking to him. "No, leave him be." "Everything." In Backland, a postman adjusted his monocle. "Interesting." He smiled, turning his gaze away from the harsh night sky and towards the distant southern continent. Honorific name. Somewhere hidden in the southern continent. Lucian and Sia emerged from a sea of colors, leaving the spirit world behind. A withered and dark forest opened up around them, bathed in the crimson light of the moon. And the air in this place was thick with the aura of death, enough to suffocate living beings until there was nothing but ashes, but they were unaffected, the ceasing aura sweeping past them harmlessly, as if it were nothing more than a breeze in their presence. "You should have noticed," Sta ventured as they began walking slowly to the heart of the death forest. Lucian stated. "The stars." Sta raised her gaze to the night sky. "They've gone hack to normal since our meeting ended." She fell silent, finishing the rest of her words in her thoughts. "Though they have taken on a new harshness." "Oh that," Lucian shrugged. "Evernight goddess most likely noticed us." Sia came to a standstill in her steps, staring at him carefully. She knew they were bound to attract the attention of gods sooner or later. After all, Lucian was planning to become death, which neither Evernight goddess nor god of combat wanted to happen, but she didn't expect them to draw their attention so quickly, and yet, in the face of this, Lucian kept his cool astonishingly well again. "It isn't only her," Lucian continued by putting his hands in his trouser pockets and looking her in the eyes. "The majority of them should have caught wind of us as well. Not to be pessimistic, you may have grand dreams, Lucian." Sia walked up to face him somberly. However, it's nothing new to 6 gods who have lived for millennia and caused the rise and fall of numerous civilizations. I know, Lucian interpreted with a wry chuckle. The gods are great, one acknowledged that, but don't underestimate what we have just achieved. He came to a halt. It's a lot more than you think. Tell me then. Sia pressed, her eagerness and sense of duty betraying her. Lucian was silent for a moment, looking up at the night sky. It's not best to talk about that here, don't you agree? He finally said. Yes. Sta begrudgingly concurred. Don't be that way. Lucian smiled and shook his head. I understand how I may seem to you, trying to avoid the sensitive questions and always appearing mysterious and all. But we've only just begun. Give it some time, and trust me when I say you'll understand everything eventually. You are asking an awful lot of my trust, Lucian. Santa said sharply. What to do? Lucian smiled. You are stuck with me now, so we might as well see it through to the end. Sia pursed her lips in frustration, but she reluctantly admitted that Lucian was correct from the moment she decided to back Lucian. Her path was set, there was no turning back, especially now that the gods had taken notice of them. Nonetheless, she wished she could wipe that willful smile from his face. All right, come on. Sia eventually sighed in defeat and walked forward. He should have probably picked up on our presence by now. That's the spirit. Lucian's smile broadened, prompting Sia to merely roll her eyes in exasperation. They dissolved in silence for the rest of their journey to the heart of the forest of death. And what greeted them was an inverted black mausoleum that wound underground, like a spiral staircase, with no visible entrance. This was the mausoleum where Hader, the leader of the artificial death faction, slept to recover from the wounds he received when his project failed catastrophically. Sia lowered her gaze to the mausoleum. Are you certain about this? Don't you think it's a shame to kill an angel? Lucian countered, side glancing her. The amount of effort and time it takes to become a mythical creature is enormous, and cultivating them is even more difficult, so I don't want to kill Hader unless there is no other option. There is also the fact that he oversaw the artificial death project, so there was no one better than him to keep the uniqueness of death under wraps from the snooping dogs of gods. How do you know the artificial death is the uniqueness? Sia looked at Lucian, baffled, then realized how stupid her question was. Well, who am I kidding? Of course, you know. She continued, ignoring Lucian, who smiled amusingly at her. Anyway, you are correct, she agreed, telling him about the current situation between the factions of the Numinous Episcopet. Even though I attempted to take over the artificial death faction, Halter was able to keep the bulk of his power due to the complete suppression that comes with the death pathway. When Sia mentioned the suppression, there was a look of distaste on her face that told Lucian she wasn't a fan of it. So, if Hader fell, it would cause chaos and only weaken our organization. Even so, Hader is far too engrossed in his obsession with death, he will not listen to your reason. Lucian, that is where you are mistaken. Lucian shook his head at Sia. Hader is a thorough zealot, and the best way to deal with such people is to give them what they want. What do you mean? Sia inquired, her brow furrowed. Remember what I said. Lucian smiled. You will understand eventually. Truly, Sia thought, twitching her lips. A charlatan. Come on. Lucian prompted, his figure fading into the spirit world. Sta looked at the spot where Lucian stood in silence for a split second before following him into the inverted mausoleum through the spirit world. Who truly are you, Lucian? She thought as she caught up with him, and they rapidly made their way to the heart of the mausoleum. They landed instantly on a long and dim walkway flanked by a black lake filled with bones and corpses that spread into the darkness. The walkway in front of them led to a wide platform with a coffin erected on it, but it was open, with a figure sitting in front of it, his head bowed in ominous silence. As they approached, the figure looked up. His dark eyes were as dark as an ocean without light, and his slim silhouette shifted slightly, his gloomy robes swaying like dark waves. His aura was cold and sharp, as were his young features, which became even more so in their presence. Hatter, the leader of the artificial death faction. He's recovered his strength, Sia judged heavily from the aura emanating from Halter. The reckless man, as usual, didn't bother hiding his recovery, instead blatantly showing it to them. To what do I owe this pleasure, Sia? Hader eventually broke the brief silence between them. Have you come to see if I kicked the bucket, or have you finally mustered the courage to do the deed yourself? Tell me, Sia, tell me. Hader taunted her viciously, his words reverberating in menacing echoes throughout the mausoleum. However, part of his attention was also concentrated on Lucian, scrutinizing him. Sia snapped deafeningly, shattering the echoes. Your dream ends today, Hader, she declared, unleashing her aura. Ridiculous. Halter laughed chillingly, rising from the ground as the black lake shook with waves as his aura clashed with Sia's. You never learn, do you, Sia? A spark of pale fire bloomed in his dark pool of eyes. Their confrontation was cut short when Lucian suddenly appeared in the middle of them. Sia, you are wrong about one thing. He corrected, his hands in his pockets. Hader's dreams will not only end today but will also be reborn. Who are you? Hader inquired, a cautious look in his eyes as he stared at Lucian, who seemed completely unbothered by the confrontation of their auras despite being in the middle of it. Lucian spun around to face Hader, striding towards him with brisk steps. Who am 17 inches? He titled his head thoughtfully. That's a good question, but where's the fun in introducing myself, don't you reckon, sis? Stock could only nod in agreement, wondering what Lucian was going to do with Halter. So look at me, and tell me what you see, Lucian continued, his voice becoming low and deep, almost a haunted whisper in the darkness. Tell me what I am. He trailed off into silence. Halter and SLA subconsciously followed his commands, fixating their gazes on him, and suddenly, they were not looking at Lucian. They weren't even looking at a man anymore. All Hader and Sia saw was an infinite, boundless cosmos collapsing, planets splitting, stars exploding, galaxies melting. Beneath it all lay a cosmic grave, and in it, they saw innumerable ruins, Cash singing to them a somber and painful story to them. Civilization eternally lost. Names forever forgotten. Everything and everyone meeting their inevitable end, falling into the embrace of death. They were astounded by what they were witnessing, especially Hader, whose emotions were swaying and causing his heart to race. After all, he was witnessing something he had always dreamed of, completely dedicated himself to, and always yearned for. He was witnessing death, the ultimate end of all things, in his true form. And he broke Hader. With that, Halter felt the world spin around him, and the next thing he knew, he was back in his mausoleum, completely breathless and trembling, but he ignored his condition, bolting towards Lucian and kneeling in front of him, in repentance. Please pardon my previous petulance, my lord. He pleaded hoarsely, his head bowed, not daring to look up at his lord. Your faithful servant failed to recognize you. Sia Palenque Egger had her hand over her heart, taking deep breaths as she tried to gather herself. But she was completely unable to do so because she had never witnessed anything like that, even in her long years of life. And even in this state, she was able to notice Hader completely surrendering to Lucian in piety and repentance. She should have been shocked by the turn of events, but she found herself understanding what had just happened in front of her eyes, just as Lucian had predicted. Hader's faith in death had grown to the point where he no longer believed in their previous lord, the underworld emperor. Instead, he began to seek and yearn for the concept of death itself, wanting to understand its mysteries and wonders and willing to sacrifice everything for it. Now Lucian emerged, revealing himself to be the embodiment of all of that and compelling Halter to submit wholly to him. Her thoughts were interrupted by Lucian, who looked down at Hader with an unreadable expression. You have yet to respond to my question. Hader immediately answered piously, his head remaining bowed in repentance. You are the Great Reaper. That I am, Lucian echoed, allowing Hader to finally take a heavy breath in relief. Then he turned and looked at Sia. Sia met his gaze in a moment of reckoning silence, and then she walked forward to Lucian resolutely, joining Halter. My lord. She bowed to him, in acknowledgement. At this moment, she knew she had made the right choices today. Lucian hummed with a smile. Good, he said, stand up now. They obliged and looked at him, though it took Hater a lot of internal struggle to finally gather the courage and meet his eyes. Lucian continued, "Let's focus on our first order of business. Slowly spread word of my existence throughout the southern continent. It will ignite the hopes in everyone's hearts and push them to start preparing for what is to come. Then, in terms of the religion of death, gradually stop promoting the teachings of the fallen underworld emperor and replace them with mine. More on this later, but for now, let's start with the replacement of honorific names." Hatter spoke somberly. "But, my lord, if we do this, we will end up attracting everyone's attention, including the gods. Most gods should be aware of my existence, it is already inevitable, so carry on." Lucian revealed, and then continued immediately, noticing his confusion and astonishment. "Hater, Sia will fill you in on everything that happened later." Sia and Hater bowed, acknowledging his order, then exchanged a look before Sia spoke up. "My lord," she inquired. "Your honorific name," Lucian declared. "The Great Reaper from beyond. The shadow that embodies death. The ultimate end of all things. The deteriorating situation." Throughout the southern continent, whispers began to spread in the shadows, whispers that told of the return of the descendant of death and informed of his great existence. And they infected the heart of the southern continent, igniting the fading hopes and ebbing dreams. It let them burn brilliantly like never before. Along with them came a yearning that was deeply ingrained in everyone, a yearning that could create wonders and bring civilizations to their knees. A yearning for liberty. But, as the saying goes, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and whispers were no exception, as they not only reignited the fading fire of the southern continent but also drew the attention of the world to it. With that, the trend of the times began to surge significantly, straying from the intended course and plunging the fate of the world into chaos and disorder. The cause of it all sat alone in a big hall within a massive and majestic structure that appeared to be a bizarre combination of a mausoleum and a castle, perched atop a mountain range between East and West Balam. This was the headquarters of the Numinous Episcopet. And the Kants was none other than Lucian, the Great Reaper, the embodiment of death, the ultimate end of all things, the Dark Messiah, the Sultan of the Dead, the Monarch of Sleeping Marches, and so on and so forth. Lucian had made quite a name for himself in just 2 weeks since securing the loyalty of Sia and Hatter and seizing total control of the Numinous Episcopate. The people of Balam even bestowed upon him numerous new titles, including Dark Messiah, which raised his brows due to its ominous undertone. They do not destre a peaceful revolution after centuries of persecution under the Northerners. As he heard more and more of their prayers, this became clear to him. Prayers, indeed. The Numinous Episcopate had successfully replaced the honorific name of Underworld Emperor in religion's teachings with his own. It was not difficult for them to accomplish because they essentially oversaw the religion of death from the shadows and were responsible for its survival up to this point. So, he'd been inundated with prayers from all over the southern continent since then, and he was still doing his best to respond to the majority of them. The change in honorific names also resulted in a less desirable development. The forces of the outer gods, led by the Rose school of thought, had come at the Numinous Episcopate with their guns blazing. To be honest, Lucian had no idea why the outer gods hated him so much that they didn't hesitate to direct their forces against him and his organization. Nonetheless, the Numinous Episcopate was forced to confront the Rose school of thought. The conflict between two extraordinary organizations went about as well as you might expect. To cut a long story short, it was brutal, with fights between low and mid-sequence Beyonders already taking place in many locations across West Balam. And he had a feeling it wouldn't be long before high-sequence Beyonders joined in. Their clash was obviously noticed by Intis and Loan, who were also continuously battling on the borders of East and West Balam. But the northern countries chose a wait-and-see strategy, not wishing to escalate the situation. There was also the fact that they were unsure about Lucian's existence. He was surrounded by mysteries and unknowns, which pushed them even further to take that approach. Even when their governments attempted to consult with the Orthodox churches, they were met with a strange silence. But he knew it wouldn't be long before they were drawn into their conflict, as the freedom movement gained traction as a result of his presence and the Numinous Episcopet's propaganda. If his predictions come true, insurgencies would erupt across the southern continent by the beginning of the next year. By the way, how did Lucian know about everything that was going on in the northern continent? He successfully established the information-gathering network that he had planned using his spirits at the start of the previous week. And Adam, from time to time, also granted him clear reports on the situation of the northern continent through the Twilight Hermit Order. Returning to their conflict, if Loan and Intis, and possibly Fasak, joined them, the entire southern continent would be thrown into chaos. He hoped to avoid this. He understood that war was unavoidable, but it should have meaning and purpose, which this conflict lacks. All this would result in pointless destruction and bloodshed. I need to overthrow the hold Loan and Intis have on the southern continent before the situation devolves into this, Lucian brooded, gazing at the map of the world that was spread before him on a silver table. Easier said than done, he chuckled wryly in his head before grabbing a cup of coffee from the side of the table and sipping it to calm his chaotic heart. In the last 2 weeks, a lot had happened, not only for the world but also for him. Where does he even start with them? That would do. First and foremost, with the support of Sia and Hader, he became the leader of the Numinous Episcopet. And they became his angels, and in the aftermath of this event, both of the factions they led within the Numinous Episcopet were united with little to no resistance or conflict, as both of them had absolute control over their factions, albeit through different methods. Then his angels presented him with all of the information on Numinous Episcopet, from the number of Beyonders in the organization to the number of branches around the world, from the details of sealed artifacts they held to divisions and hierarchies within the organization to the detailed history of the organization to knowledge they had on other organizations and entities. They gave him everything he needed to review and become acquainted with the new leadership position he had just assumed. And let him tell you from many sleepless nights and tired days that leading a secret organization was no joke. He basically moved in here, but he was still extremely pleased with what he got. How could he not? After all, the might and power of the Numinous Episcopate surpassed those of the ordinary Orthodox Church in this era. Unlike the Orthodox churches, which had reduced their forces to a bare minimum since the beginning of the Fifth Epoch, Sia and Hader focused on expanding and strengthening their organization in order to achieve the glory that the Eggers fattily had in the Fourth Epoch. And they would have succeeded if it hadn't been for the constant turmoil of the southern continent, but their organization was still a beast in comparison to an Orthodox church. This advantage would be critical in the coming war. The thing that completely piqued his interest, however, was a Grade O sealed artifact. It was a blood-red sword, which was also a sequence -1 characteristic of the Red Priest pathway. When Lucian read that, he raised his brow in surprise because he hadn't expected the Numinous Episcopate to have a Conqueror characteristic, but as he read the report, his surprise faded completely. The Conqueror characteristic was acquired from the fall of the Underworld Emperor and was replaced by thoughtfulness. He knew the birth of the Red Priest was inevitable in the future, so he began to consider how he could take advantage of the situation. His organization may be strong, but it would fall short if all Orthodox churches came at Numinous Episcopate in full force. Thus, in the upcoming World War, if he wanted to win, he needed allies, which this Conqueror characteristic might just grant, but he hadn't decided on this yet, brooding on it still from time to time. Which brings us to the second item on his recent activities. Lucian began preparing for the Pale Emperor ritual. Leaving aside the requirement of constructing an empire, he had focused on another, conquering 100,000 spirits for his future empire. This proved simple because he had sole authority, which gave him complete control over the spirits. However, given his circumstances, conquering that many spirits would still take some time, but not to the point where it would interfere with his overall plans. The religion of death was the third item on the list. Lucian has almost decided on the changes that have to be made to the religion. It wasn't anything drastic that went against the norms and traditions of the southern continent, but it just aimed to change the image of death in people's hearts from the Underworld Emperor to Lucian. The first step he planned to take was to change the sacred emblem from the inverted mausoleum to a white rose blooming in darkness and then proceed from there. Finally, Lucian oversaw the conflict between the Numinous Episcopet and the Rose school of thought. He didn't technically lead the war effort, Sia and Halter did. He was honest with them about his lack of expertise in the art of warfare, so they immediately volunteered to teach him, using this opportunity, as it was a must-have skill for any leader. And that was a short and succinct summary of what he had done in the previous weeks. There were still minor events he hadn't mentioned, such as the time he gave a marvelous and passionate speech to all high-sequence beyonders of the Numinous Episcopate. Anyway, returning to the subject at hand, Lucian set aside the empty cup and picked up the report submitted by William Bell, a saint of the Numinous Episcopate, which detailed the outcome of the task he assigned to him and other saints. As he read it again, his brows furrowed heavily. He had instructed them to keep an eye out for any movements of Orthodox churches, but they detected none. The churches of the seven gods remained silent on the changing situation on the southern continent, but why? What were the seven gods planning? Lucian pondered that question, tapping the armrest rhythmically. His mind raced with hypotheses and assumptions, but he was soon interrupted by Sia and Halter, who had arrived for their daily meetings to discuss the developments of the battles in the West Balam, and through this, they taught him the art of warfare. "My lord," they greeted him in unison. Lucian hummed in recognition. He then motioned for them to take their places at the silver table in front of Hin. "Before we begin," the Reaper thrummed his armrest, his gaze fixed on his angels. "There are some issues that need to be addressed." Lucian knew it was time to address the issues he had been putting off as he finally settled into his new role as leader of the Numinous Episcopate. "What are they, my lord?" Hayter inquired, intrigued. "First and foremost, the last Pale Emperor characteristic," Lucian spoke forthrightly. "It's with Bernardet Gustave as he expected, there wasn't much surprise in either of their faces." Sia inquired, meeting his silver gaze with trepidation. "So you don't really belong to our pathway?" She phrased it more as a statement than a question. "Issues. First and foremost, the last Pale Emperor characteristic." Lucian spoke forthrightly. "It's with Bernardet Gustave." Sia inquired, meeting his silver gaze with trepidation. "So you don't really belong to our pathway?" She phrased it more as a statement than a question. Lucian thoughtfully thrummed his armrest. "Have you heard the legend among the ancient gods about the original creator?" Hayter and Sia exchanged hesitant glances, both puzzled as to why their lord had suddenly brought up the original creator. However, Sia turned and answered his question solemnly. "I am not certain, my lord. I've only heard rumors about this." Lucian nodded, encouraging her to continue. Sia did so. "Rumor has it that the original creator left behind 9 different entities. They were kingdoms, cities, rivers, oceans, and keys. And the ancient gods tried everything they could to find them and inherit the legacies of the original creator, but their efforts were said to be ultimately futile. The original creator left 9 legacies behind," Lucian revealed. "They're known as Sephiroths." Sephiroths. That word hung in the air, sending Sia and Halter into deep thought about the reasons for the conflict between gods, as they had a strong feeling both were deeply related given the correlation between the 9 Sephiroths and the 9 sequence groups. That couldn't possibly be a coincidence. Lucian proceeded steadily. "Sephiroths are required for gods to progress beyond sequence O and become great old ones." "Is that so?" They nodded lightly, feeling enlightened. His words simply confirmed many of their long-held assumptions about the gods and the cosmos. "The river Styx." Halter immediately asked about the river that was always correlated with the underworld emperor. Even he used it in his honorific name. "Is it the Sephiroth for our group of pathways?" "Styx is simply one of its titles." Lucian corrected, shaking his finger. "The true name of the Sephiroth is the River of Eternal Darkness." A stilling chill descended into the hall the moment the name of the Sephiroth was spoken, causing Sta and Halter to tremble in their seats, clutching their armrests tightly. But their lord seemed unaffected, or did he? They didn't know. Lucian declared, his raspy voice dispelling the chill. "Well, all you need to know is that my existence is inextricably linked to that river, therefore, for all intents and purposes, I am death. Nothing can deny that. The Reaper peered at his angels. Understood. Yes, they nodded in unison, understanding the underlying meaning of his remarks. Even at their level, some secrets were best left unexplored, though it would be lie to say they weren't a bit disappointed in the end. Now, Luckton brought the subject back to the matter at hand. Let's return to the last Pale Emperor characteristic, which, as I previously stated, is with Bernardet Gustave. Gustave. Sta muttered the wretched surname under her breath, a glint of hatred in her eyes. Hatter, on the other hand, remained calm. He didn't seem to care that Bernardet was the daughter of the man responsible for the current state of the southern continent. Instead, he was preoccupied with something else. How did the characteristic fall into her hands, my lord? How do you think? Lucian returned the question. Rissel Gustave. SLA confidently answered for Halter. Yes. Luckton nodded subtly. Rissel somehow discovered the Pale Emperor characteristic while adventuring around the southern continent. I must admit, despite all the horrid things he's done, Sia admitted grudgingly. Rissel is one lucky man. Oh, Lucian chuckled wryly. I'm not so sure about that. Sia was confused and wanted to press, but her lord's look suggested that he didn't want to discuss about Rissel any further. Well, my lord, what do you want us to do? Hayter spoke up after a moment of silence between them. My lord, Bernardet is merely a saint. Sia chimed in enthusiastically. And the organization she found isn't much better. Just set up a meeting with her for me. Lucian abruptly cut off her radical proposal before she could finish. Teal handle it myself. Sta sighed and concurred, but she still pointed out the obvious problem in his order. But, Bernardet knows how much she is hated on the southern continent, so she is unlikely to agree to meet with you. Oh, she will agree. Lucian smiled willfully. Just tell her I have information on her father's condition, and she'll come to me one way or another, like a moth drawn to a flame. Rissel's condition, Sia noticed keenly, then she clenched her hands. As I thought, that wretched man is still alive. Hayter, on the other hand, being the zealot that he was, didn't care that much about the shocking truth. We will immediately arrange it, my lord. He took the order unequivocally, followed by Sia, who nodded in agreement. Moving on, hummed Lucian. He took a document from the pile on the silver table and slid it over to them. Sia and Hayter examined the document. It was a disturbing report written by their organization on human trafficking in the Eastern Balam. Immediately, a troubled look flashed across both of their faces. How come you both haven't done anything about this? Lucian inquired, his eyes narrowing inquisitively at his angels. Please forgive us, Hatter bowed to Lucian. But there was nothing we could do. Elaborate, Lucian inquired, his chin comfortably resting on his knuckles. Sia took over from Hayter. We tried. She spoke in a low tone. When we first learned about the trafficking, we began investigating everything we could find about it, but the more we learned, the more our hands became tied. There were too many powerful parties involved in this, and I even suspected that unspeakable organization. She looked at Lucian for confirmation, who nodded in agreement, making Sia gulp in trepidation and Hayter close his eyes in heaviness. Sia continued, taking a breather. The point is, my lord, in the face of the trend of the times, we were powerless. Well, Lucian declared, you are no longer powerless now that you have me. We shall deal with this together. Sta and Hatter nodded silently, placing their trust in their lord. But first, do you know who is the mastermind behind the trafficking? Lucian asked, and then he answered his own question after seeing their uncertain eyes. George Augustus III, the King of Loan. The king. Sia raised her brows in surprise. To be honest, she also suspected the Augustus family after discovering evidence of M19 involvement in her trafficking investigation, but the fact that the mastermind behind it all was the King of Loan himself still astonished her. But, why does Augustus require so many slaves? Hayter, on the other hand, asked solemnly, obviously flummoxed by the strangeness of this whole situation. Lucian was silent for a moment, and then he told them about the apotheosis ritual of the Black Emperor. After he finished, there was a moment of heavy silence, which was eventually broken by the heavy sigh of Sta. The Black Emperor. Sia leaned back in her seat altogether. What sequence is he now? Sequence 1-inch, Lucian responded. Archangel. Sta cocked her brow and laughed wryly. So the 7 gods have chosen to turn a blind eye. Why am I not surprised? Leave the gods aside, Sia, Augustus is trying to steal the throne that rightfully belongs to our Lord. If he ascends to godhood, then he will truly become the Emperor of Balaam. Hayter said furiously. There isn't much to think about here. Sta sawed, her tone becoming colder with each of her words. We are going to overthrow Loan Kingdom from our land, she said boldly to Lucian, aren't we, my lord? I admire your resolve. Lucian leaned forward in his seat. But do you realize what will happen if we go down this road? A world war, Hayter accurately inferred. A world war, indeed, Lucian concurred. As you may have guessed, I intend to restore the Balaam Empire and become its emperor, which, given the circumstances, will plunge the entire world into war one way or another. He met the gazes of his angels. So are you still certain about this? A world war, indeed. Lucian concurred. As you may have guessed, I intend to restore the Balaam Empire and become its emperor, which, given the circumstances, will plunge the entire world into war one way or another. He met the gazes of his angels. So are you still certain about this? My lord. Halter solved reverently. The Northerners only gained control of our continent by using our own people. Many administrative positions are still held by us to avoid insurgencies, so all you have to do is say the word, and I will make them swear their loyalty and faith to you, which will effectively destabilize the hold that the Northerners have on the southern continent. I interpret that as a yes. Lucian grinned. My lord, we are certain. Sia finally spoke up, exchanging glances with Hayter. Good, Lucian hummed and moved on, grabbing the trafficking report. Hayter, your proposal is great, but we will discuss it later because the issue of liberation cannot be decided in a single day. I understand, my lord, Hayter bowed dutifully. But, there is something. Sta suddenly spoke up hesitantly. That unspeakable organization. Oh, Lucian said calmly. You don't have to be concerned about them, Sia. Sta nodded, trusting her lord, but she still felt a slight heaviness in her heart. Now, let's move on to the next issue. Lucian went on. The artificial death. Halter sat up straighter, bracing himself for what was about to come. Hayter. Lucian looked at his angel. Your plan to resurrect the Underworld Emperor failed because a critical component was missing. To say Hayter was shocked would be an understatement. After all, this was the plan he had dedicated most of his life to, but now his lord was revealing that there was more to this than he himself knew about. After a brief moment of silence, Hayter forced himself to ask, if you don't mind my asking, what is it? Not it, Lucian revealed. But you don't mean. Sia's eyes widened. Yes, Lucian nodded, his face betraying nothing. The critical component is, my father, Isaac Eggers. Temperance. My father, Isaac Eggers. Hayter remembered the man who ruled the Balaam Empire at the height of its glory and might. At the time, they were a force to be reckoned with and feared by the entire world. Even if he didn't care much about the empire in general, it would be a lie to say he didn't wish to see it regain its lost status under the leadership of his lord. Isaac, the critical component. Sia muttered, her eyes wide with realization. So, Evernight Goddess, she trailed off into silence. Evernight Goddess. Hayter looked at Santa, puzzled. You haven't told him. Lucian fixed his stare on Sia. No, my lord, Sta admitted, looking away. Well, it appears you both still have much work to do on unity. Lucian spoke sharply, crossing his hands. We are one organization on the path of liberty and war. We can't afford discord between us. Understood. Yes, my lord. They nodded unequivocally, understanding the stakes involved. Good, Lucian hummed contentedly before turning to face Hayter. As for my father, the Underworld Emperor chose him as a vessel for his reincarnation. This plan had a significant impact on my father's condition, making him go through the cycle of undying as well as memory loss repeatedly to prevent him from losing control. Hayter and Sia took a minute to process the information. Then Sia glanced at Lucian tentatively, as if she wanted to ask a sensitive question. Yes, Lukton simply answered her unspoken question calmly. He doesn't remember anything now, he paused. Including me. I'm sorry, my lord. Sta spoke soothingly. Don't be. Lucian shook his head forlornly. I never met the man. Hayter also wanted to say something to his lord, following Sia, but after seeing the look of his lord, which all but suggested they drop the subject, the Evernight goddess, my lord. He ventured. Oh, she probably discovered the Underworld Emperor's plans and devised some countermeasures to prevent his revival. Lucian leaned back in his seat, his chin resting on his palm, one of them undoubtedly being keeping a close eye on the vessel of reincarnation. So, Hayter sighed and closed his eyes. From the start, the artificial death was doomed to fail. One way or another. Lucian stated flatly, gnawing the coffin shut. Evernight goddess or the god of combat would have prevented the resurrection of the Underworld Emperor. I understand. Halter took a deep breath and faintly nodded, putting the matter to rest. Anyway, my lord, the uniqueness is rightfully yours now. Lucian hummed. Tell me about its recent condition. He inquired, thrumming his armrest. The artificial death is becoming dormant, Halter reported. Its consciousness was created and powered by faith, but with the replacement of honorific names, all the faith of the southern continent is gradually being directed to you instead of artificial death. That's better, Lucian concurred, and the gods. There is no need for concern, my lord, said Hayter. The artificial death is present within a mausoleum built by the Underworld Emperor himself. Even the gods can't find it. So, Lucian asked Hayter for final confirmation. Is the artificial death completely secure? Yes, Hayter nodded unequivocally. Still, Lucian insisted. My father needs to be found. My lord. His angels began to worry. Lucian raised his hand, silencing them, and then he spoke in a tone that left no room for argument. My father is far too much of a variable to be left to the whims of the orthodox gods. He met their eyes with certitude. I'll find him myself. Under his fixed gaze, Sia and Hayter could only nod in agreement. Lucian calmed down. Don't be too concerned, he said soothingly. I understand the stakes involved here, so I will only look for my father after I am completely certain one can bring him back, he immediately continued after seeing relief in either of their faces. Moving on. The Temperance faction of the Rose School of Thought. Lucian passed the report he collected on the Temperance faction to his angels. They survived, Sia exclaimed in surprise after examining the first page of the report. The Temperance faction was one of two factions within the Rose School of Thought. It promoted temperance of Destre as opposed to the other faction, which promotes indulgence of the heart. In fact, when the Chained God founded the Rose School of Thought at the beginning of the Fifth Epoch, it was united under the philosophy of temperance, but everything changed when an outer god known as Mother Tree of Destre corrupted Chained God, and through him, she began exerting her influence on Chained Pathway. This is what prompted the Rose School of Thought to split into two factions, indulgence and temperance, and they clashed, which ultimately resulted in the destruction of the Temperance faction. SLA was not surprised when she heard the news of destruction, since the Temperance faction never had chance against the Indulgence faction, which was backed by a literal outer deity. She'd even heard that Temperance faction leader Reinette Tinecare had fallen in the end. But after reading her lord's report, she immediately re-evaluated her initial assumption that none of the Temperance faction had survived. My lord, Hayter spoke up, looking up from the report. With so few survivors, they may as well be dead. Sia had to agree with Hayter on this. The survivors were both too low and too weak to be of any use to them. You are right, Lucian nodded. However, they still have some worth. They may be able to lead us to Reinette Tinker. She also survived the conflict between the Rose School of Thought factions, though not without injuries, to the point where she was forced to transform herself into a spirit in order to survive and recover. Hayter took the liberty of speculating. So, my lord, you want us to meet with these survivors and draw her out through them. Sharp as ever, Hatter. Lucian praised, much to the contentment of Halter and chagrin of Sia. Despite her state, Reinette should still keep an eye on her people. We can take advantage of this and send her an alliance proposal. He paused and looked solemnly at his angels. I believe we can all agree that Reincarnate is needed to totally eliminate the tumor that is slowly spreading on the southern continent. Yes, my lord. They concurred, recognizing the underlying meaning in his words. They had to admit that their lord was ambitious. After all, he was already planning to rid the southern continent of the influence of the outer gods. Not that they were complaining, they were more than happy to see it come true. One more thing, the survivors are in Backland, Lucian warned. So this mission must be carried out as discreetly as possible. We have a branch there, Hater said. A demigod leads it. They are proper and regular in the books of Loan. Good. Lucian gave a faint nod. Inform them immediately of my mission. The sooner we get Reincarnate on our side, the sooner this conflict will have a chance to end. After they unequivocally agreed to his order, Lucian took out parchments containing the changes he intended to make to the religion of death. He had made up his mind, but he still decided to go over his choices with his angels because, unlike him, they were the experts on southern traditions and cultures. They all eventually finalized the changes after his angels approved of his selections. It seemed that he was merely worrying himself heedlessly. Lucian directed that the changes to the religion of the dead be implemented gradually, beginning with the change of the sacred emblem from an inverted mausoleum to a white rose blooming brilliantly in the darkness, and then gradually progressing from there so that people could easily adapt to and accept it. After all of this, Lucian concluded the issues for the day, and so Hater and Sia began their daily briefing on the conflict between the Numinous Episcopet and the Rose School of Thought. No wonder Warcraft is called art, he thought as he listened intently, learning from their decisions and plans for the conflict. Time flew by, and before he knew it, Lucian was alone in the hall, sipping his coffee and peering at the report on human trafficking networks. His mind was racing with plans for how to effectively eliminate these horrifying networks from the face of the earth. Apart from his disgust with the concept of slavery, there was another reason for his desire to destroy these networks. He intended to absolutely ruin Augustus' apotheosis ritual before it could even begin. He even planned to expose the atrocities he committed to the world. Lucian pondered how the people of Loan would react if they learned that their beloved king had kidnapped not only Southerners but also his own people to become his slaves. But, in the end, he shook his head, dismissing not only this plan but the majority of them because there was something he hadn't factored in. But, in the end, he shook his head, dismissing not only this plan but the majority of them because there was something he hadn't factored in. Something that bothered him greatly. The seven gods. Lucian pondered heavily as he gazed up at the night sky through a stained window. Astral world. How long has it been? A god beamed, literally, as his smile emitted radiance that blindingly illuminated other gods and goddesses assembled in the dark hall. Contract. Astral world. The abstract and metaphysical plane that stretched and intersected throughout the infinity of the cosmos. It was, in essence, chaotic, yet it also had a peculiar order to it, bearing a contradiction in and of itself. Perhaps the cosmos was merely an agglomeration of contradictions, all of which supported each other in some cosmic way. This theory was not without foundations, for the original creator split apart to create the cosmos as a consequence of the aggregation of contradictory concepts that they embodied. Since the beginning of the fifth epoch, gods had called this twisted place their home. It was not that they preferred the astral world over Earth, but the broken barrier forced them to relocate their divine kingdoms here to support it. In light of this, the gods decided to withdraw from the stage and enter the shadows of the world. To enforce this, they gathered together to form a contract under the witness of the eternal blazing sun. The main purpose of the contract was to forbid the gods from descending into the world with their true bodies. As the gods signed the contract and left for the astral world, they effectively ended the glorious era of gods. And ever since then, the peace in the astral realm within the barrier has been entirely disrupted just once, courtesy of none other than Russell Gustav, who, in all his audacity, tried to use the gods themselves in his plot to rid the corruption of cosmos. Nevertheless, the eternal blazing sun and the god of steam and machinery granted Russell his wish. They confronted and slew Russell, the Black Emperor, when he invaded the astral realm. Though they were cruel and petty enough not only to have their angels destroy practically all of his mausoleums but also not to inform him that his plan was doomed to fail in the end. But now the peace of the astral world was once again disturbed, even more than before, forcing the gods themselves to gather together for the first time since the beginning of the fifth epoch. The tenebrous heaven, the divine kingdom of Evernight Goddess, lay on the broken barrier in all its serenity, and deep within it stood a Gothic black castle with a vast hall supported by massive pillars. A silver table was in the center, with 7 chairs, 3 on either side and 1 at the head, all occupied by the gods. How long has it been? Awakens, the eternal blazing sun, literally beamed as his smile radiated a light that blindingly illuminated the other gods and goddesses, causing everyone to frown in distaste. Awakens. Leodoro, the Lord of Storms, thundered, squinting against the dazzling glare that illuminated him. Shut your mouth. Have some decorum, Awakens. Hermes, the god of knowledge and wisdom, added fiercely. In the light of the current situation. Whatever, Awakens waved his hand dismissively, though he still begrudgingly willed his magnificent radiance to dim under the fixed gazes of everyone. After a millennium, we are all finally gathered in one place, which calls for a celebration. Lilith, the Earth Mother, who was still veiled as Umbella, meditated gently before the 3 sworn brothers went at each other's necks. It's a special occasion, there's no doubt about it, but let's focus on what really matters, shall we? Everyone, including Awakens, eventually swayed in agreement to the words of Lilith, for she always acted as a mediator of the gods due to her neutral and distinct position. The Evernight Goddess, Amanises, sat at the head of the Stiver table, having graciously agreed to host the meeting in her divine kingdom. Let's begin. She waved her hand, and the crimson moonlight that streamed into the hall instantly formed a curtain above the middle of the table, revealing an image of a handsome young man with bronze skin and silver eyes. Lucian Eggers, Amanises declared. The one that threw the fate of the world into utter chaos. What do we know about him? Artisan, the god of steam and machinery, addressed everyone directly after a moment of silence. Despite their alliance, the 7 gods never completely trusted each other, keeping their secrets close to their hearts, but Artisan, as another neutral party, pressured the gods to reveal their findings on Lucian, at least parts of them, given the situation of the world. Lucian is an anomaly, Hermes revealed, his omniscient eyes twinkling mysteriously from the shadows of his hood. There is no better way to describe his existence. I concur. Lilith agreed, the animal and plant illustrations on her pure white gown shimmering with life. He is an archangel, and I sense little to no life force from him, so his authorities should be related to death, but no pale emperor has ascended in the world since Salinger. First of all, Badhel, the god of combat, spoke up, emphasizing each of his words. Why haven't any of us noticed his existence beforehand? Amanises and Hermes exchanged glances, which didn't go overlooked at all. Say it, Badhel asked begrudgingly. He may not like them, but what could he do? They were the only ones among the 7 gods to wield the authorities related to fate. Well, Hermes faintly revealed his findings from fate. That's because Lucian was only a mortal a month ago. For a brief moment, the hall fell silent, only to be broken by the heavy sigh of Badhel as he sat still in his seat, beginning to feel the coming of an uncertain future. The other gods, though, began to put forward their assumptions about this strange situation. Could his existence be related to a Sephiroth? Artisan ventured. Similar to Russell. Awakens grunted in annoyance as soon as that name was thrown. It was a sort of unspoken truth among the gods that Russell didn't belong to this era and was most probably a part of the resurrection plan of the Lord of Mysteries. River of eternal darkness, huh? Lilith brooded. I also think so. Leodoro chimed in, pointing at the picture of Lucian. He is the direct descendant of Salinger. Could Lucian be another arrangement he left behind? After all, he did control a tributary of the River of Eternal Darkness. He is a direct descendant of Salinger, Badhel repeated with a frown. But we made sure that almost all of them died by the end of the 4th epoch, and the only one who survived went missing, but was presumed to have also fallen in the end. He trailed off, a look of realization suddenly flashing in his twilight eye, and then he immediately snapped it to their host. Now, Tell me, Amanises, you didn't have a hand in Azek's disappearance, did you? He inquired, and with each of his words, his tone grew colder and colder. Amanises met his glare equally, not bothering to answer his question, which enraged Badhale even more because he realized Amanises was always a step ahead of him in their quest for the uniqueness of the death, which was actually hidden from them under Salinger's arrangement, but Azek might just be the key that could lead to uniqueness, and Amanises always held him in her palm. The more Badhale thought about it, the angrier he got. His twilight eye began to shine with a lost brilliance. However, before anything drastic could occur, Lilith intervened. This is no time for quarrels, she declared gently, then looked at her son soothingly. Badhale, whatever Amanises had planned, it is no longer going to be applicable considering everything that happened, so let's rewind and focus on Lucian. Badhale restrained his anger under the reasoning of his mother, but still shot a withering glare at Amanises before nodding compliantly. Yes, mother. Mother. Akasis muttered under his breath, exchanging a smirk with Leodoro. You both have something to say. Badhale snapped at Akasis and Leodoro. Children. Lilith commented exhaustedly. What was that? Leodoro began but was cut off by Harabergen, who captured everyone's attention with just 3 words. Adam supports Lucian. Of course, he supports Lucian. Akasis grumbled. He is Adam, after all. I believe you are still unaware of the gravity of our situation. Amanises told Akasis, and then she addressed everyone. Chaos is a ladder. She paused. In this case, chaos takes the form of Lancian, whose mere presence affects everything and everyone. And Adam has influence over him, the chaos bringer. She trailed off, her underlying implications carrying in the air. A veil of heaviness draped the hall as the gods thoroughly considered the implications in silence, but Lilith eventually broke it, rubbing her temples. This situation is troubling indeed. We need to stop this. Leodoro immediately thundered. Adam cannot continue to shape the trend of times as he pleases. I agree, but there is no stopping what is going to happen, Leodoro Harabergen sighed. Lucian was able to seize control of the Numinous Episcopet, whether through his efforts or Adam's arrangement, reigniting hope for freedom throughout the southern continent. It won't be long before insurgencies erupt across the continent, sparking a global war that, given everything, is already unavoidable. A world war is unstoppable, but Adam isn't, Leodoro persisted. He has managed to keep himself hidden from us for so long, but now there is an opening. He paused. All of his plans and arrangements for the coming change of times should include Lucian in some way, so all we have to do is deal with him to completely disrupt everything, and in the ensuing chaos, we can destroy Adam's hold on the world. This might work. Artisan nodded. However, it will not be easy. Adam understands the significance of Lucian, and Lucian himself is beset with mysteries, so if we are to proceed, I suggest we wait until we have a complete picture of the situation. We will never have a complete picture. Amanises retorted, surprising everyone. Lucian's existence itself makes sure of that. So what do you suggest, Amanises? Artisan asked, looking at her along with everyone else. I think if Lucian's situation has proven anything, it's that the world is going to become more and more chaotic as the apocalypse approaches, to the point where even we might end up finding ourselves powerless. Amanises declared. So I suggest that we nullify the contract we signed at the end of the 4th epoch. Shattered. I think if Lucian's situation has proven anything, it's that the world is going to become more and more chaotic as the apocalypse approaches, to the point where even we might end up finding ourselves powerless. Amanises declared. So I suggest that we nullify the contract we signed at the end of the 4th epoch. Nullifying the contract. A ripple of uncertainty spread throughout the gods, as they contemplated her suggestion. The contract was the agreement signed between the gods that forbade them from descending into the world with their true bodies. The biggest reason behind it was the amount of devastation wrought on the world by the end of the War of the Four Emperors. Contrary to common belief among high-sequence beyonders of this era, the War of the Four Emperors was fought by all the gods, rather than just the four emperors. The middle to end of the 4th epoch was a truly chaotic time, with gods frequently changing alliances and attacking one another. The War of the Gods was all too common back then, erupting every now and then, but most of it produced no Veter. The havoc and devastation caused by all of it, though, were unimaginable. The gods were powerful, almost too powerful. In essence, they were abstract beings. Their mere presence could stir the concepts they embody, so even if they had complete control over their authorities, there would always be collateral damage in between their battles. So, by the end of the War of Four Emperors, the planet was scarred, and it was only made worse when death fell, which would have actually destroyed the world if not for the support of the seven gods, but his demise still caused the formation of the Berserk Sea that separated the northern and southern continents. All in all, by the end of the fourth epoch, human civilization was on the brink of ruin. It could no longer bear another war of gods, so the seven gods put aside their differences and broke bread with each other. First, they sealed the true creator in the forsaken land of gods, considering that his unstable and fallen nature would worsen the situation of the world, though the true reason was that he was too powerful to be left completely free. Then they formalized their alliance by signing a contract that prohibited them from descending into the world with their true bodies. By doing this, they sought to give the world time to heal its wounds, which it desperately needed, while also allowing it to grow and prosper without their direct interference. The gods had honored the contract impartially since the beginning of the fifth epoch, and as the centuries passed, the earth had healed and civilization had grown prosperously, regaining its lost splendor. But in light of the current situation, Amanises urged that they nullify it. Amanises continued, seeing through their reservations. I understand your doubts and concerns. If we revoke the contract and descend into the world, everything will change, but the current situation is more than enough to tell us that we can no longer simply sit here until the situation devolves beyond our control, for example, like now. The Evernight goddess then pointed at the picture of Lucian. The existence of Lucian is riddled with mysteries and unknowns. We can make all the assumptions we want about him, but in the end, something is going to be left out, and that alone has the potential to push us all into a disadvantageous position if we aren't able to react to it immediately. She trailed her eyes over all of them and then finished resoundingly. We must act. Those three words rang out in the hall, shattering the uncertainty of the gods. Though they understood why Amanises was so steadfast in pressing her suggestion because Lucian ultimately affected her path more than others, they could still see the truth and reason behind her words. Awakens, as the god of contracts, finally spoke up sharply. Amanises, your proposal still does not address the issue of barrier. Any of our descents into the world has the potential to weaken and worsen the barrier. He trailed off, turning everyone's attention back to Amanises. And that's why, Amanises addressed, we shall only descend into the world when the situation completely demands our presence. She met the gazes of everyone and found no opposition. So one think that finalizes it. Yes, Hermes nodded. But before we vote on this, there is still something that needs to be addressed. What is it? Amanises prompted ethereally, reclining in her seat. George Augustus III, Hermes revealed. Leodoro frowned in distaste. Why are you bringing him up now? Come on, Leodoro. Hermes said. You know why. Leodoro grunted. He knew, alright, the need for a black emperor in the world had increased with the impending war, because it would be fought between the northern and southern continents, and there was an unspoken fact that Lucian was probably aiming to become death, and his chances of success were high with atoms supporting him. Without direct intervention from the gods, the northern continent was bound to lose one way or another against both of them, and this could not happen because it would affect all of their anchors, so there was a need for someone to lead the war to their victory in their place, and for this position, who else was more suitable than the Black Emperor? Nevertheless, Leodoro wasn't having any of it. If history has proven anything, he retorted to Hermes, then emperors only spell doom. Altisa and Trunsoest betrayed us. Solomon suppressed us. And Salinger took it a step further, trying to destroy everything with his madness. On this, I agree with Leodoro. Ancuses concurred. Leaving aside past examples, consider the most recent one, Russell Gustav, and think whether it is a good idea to support an emperor once again. Hermes, on the other hand, persisted objectively. However, there was a need for a black emperor to be born before the apocalypse, and that need has only grown with the current developments. How about this? Amanises suggested a middle ground. We will only provide indirect support to George Augustus III. Whether he can ascend to become the Black Emperor is entirely dependent on his ability. If he can't even do this, he's not fit to lead our nations in the coming world war against the southern continent. If we go through with this, Loan is going to change. Leodoro grimaced. Yes. Amanises nodded. An emperor needs an empire, after all. Leodoro merely grunted, shifting in his seat. So, any objections? Amanises addressed everyone and was met with an approving silence. Even Leodoro stayed silent, though his annoyance was written all over his face. Then that's decided. When the time comes, we shall give our indirect support to George Augustus IIL. Now, let's get back to the contract the Evernight goddess prompted. Awakens. The eternal blazing sun flicked his fingers. Above their table, a golden contract materialized in the brilliance of the sun, carrying the signatures of the 7 gods. Let's begin, Amanises called for the vote ethereally. All for nullifying the contract. Amanises, Leodoro, Awakens, Heribergen, Lilith, Badhale, and Artisan, all of them raised their hands unanimously in the epical moment. As each of the gods voted in favor, the signatures on the golden contract dimmed, and the power within them dispersed into nothingness. And from these, cracks began to emerge and spread throughout the contract until it could no longer hold itself together. The golden contract of the gods shattered into particles of light, falling slowly on the table under the gazes of all. Amanises immediately heard the terrifying roar pounding against her ears. And she felt anarchy, raw chaos brought about by her action, spreading throughout destiny. But she took it all with serenity, unaffected and unperturbed. The change of times has begun. The Evernight goddess proclaimed. Amanises remained in her seat even after the epical gathering of the gods ended, gazing at the image of Lucian that still floated above the silver table in serene silence. It would be a lie to say she didn't feel enraged when Lucian broke the trend of the times. With that, he had effectively wrecked all of her plans to obtain the uniqueness of the death. But not all was lost. She retained Azek in her palm. She could still make an effort to discover the uniqueness of death through him, which would completely end the path of Lucian. But she wasn't going to do that. She wasn't even going to stop Lucian, at least not right away. For when she pried into his fate, she discovered something that even Heribergen hadn't noticed. Suddenly, right beside the image of Lucian, another image emerged under the crimson brilliance, revealing the image of a young man with black hair, brown eyes, an average-looking face, and a deep outline. Klein Moretti. Amanises gazed at the images of Lucian and Klein together, her discovery flashing through her mind. Their fates were similar. And the Evernight goddess smiled. Curse. November 15, 1349. Plans. That was all Lucian was doing these days, but not alone, since his angels were with him, pulling all-nighters together for days on end. It wasn't all that bad with cups of coffee and his mystical creature nature. He easily got through it, but he still liked to sleep. After all, who doesn't? It's essentially a biological recharge mechanism, and it comes with the dreams. Oh, dreams, don't let him start on that. Anyway, what are they planning all these nights? Simply put, it was a massacre. He wasn't joking, as much as he wished, but it was a stark reality that he wanted to come true one way or another. To be honest, his past self would never have considered murdering someone, much less plotting a slaughter. Yet here he was, planning a full-fledged assault on the military forces of Intis and Loan stationed in the southern continent, with the aim of pushing them all into the embrace of death. Those were people, each with their own sentiments, dreams, and desires, each with their own families back home, praying and hoping for their well-being. Nevertheless, he desired to stain his hands with all of their blood. When he thought about it, he didn't feel anything, maybe a little uncertainty, but that was all. He was changing. Lucian recognized it, and it scared him. He understood that change was inevitable, but it was just that one day in the distant future, he would look at himself in the mirror and find a complete stranger, an ember of what he once was, tarnished and broken. That prospect terrified him. Lucian didn't want to lose himself. But the path he chose denied him that luxury. It was essential for him to carry on despite the sacrifices and losses within himself until the end, if there was one, he assumed. Lucian remembered the vow he made to himself on his first day in Kolain: you must survive. Lucian, survive long enough to live your life fully. Surviving would become even more difficult after the new year, when the world war would break out and the seven gods would come blaring for his neck. After all, he wasn't just going to fight the northern continent but also the gods that stood behind them. He realized how precarious his situation was, as he would ultimately go up against the orthodox gods themselves. Even with Adam by his side in his own power, there was a good chance he'd wind up dying under the dark side of the Evernight goddess or the twilight sword of the god of combat. This, however, would not discourage him from his path, just as his fear of losing himself had not. This was the path he chose. Lucian reminded himself. And it's for sure was going to get excruciating, nevertheless, he would see it to the end. You are adaptive, Adam had stated on their first meeting. That sounded like a compliment at the time, but now those words were nothing but a curse to him. A curse he did not reject but bore within himself. After all, without it, everything would come crashing down on him. Lucian took a last sip of coffee and put an end to his depressing thoughts as he took the last drink of his coffee, gathering himself, and returned to his seat within his office, which was located in the uppermost room of the headquarters of the Numinous Episcopet. His office was simple, nothing too fancy, just enough to suit his tastes. There were wall-to-wall books, decked out on bookshelves with white rose emblems carved on top, and a few completed sketches scattered on a table facing an expansive window. There were all of the drawings that he drew in his spare time. In the center of the room, there was a long silver table filled with stacks and stacks of reports, filling his office with that magical smell of paper. Since his office was finished, he and his angels have held their daily meetings here. Lucian, on the other hand, sat at his personal and short table, which was also silver. He really likes silver, doesn't he? It was in front of a horizontally stained window with an unrestricted view of the outside world. He would simply stand by it at sunset and witness the world illuminated by twilight. Once, he even drew the scene onto a canvas, thus capturing it for all time. Lucian, on the other hand, sat at his personal and short table, which was also silver. He really likes silver, doesn't he? It was in front of a horizontally stained window with an unrestricted view of the outside world. He would simply stand by it at sunset and witness the world illuminated by twilight. Once, he even drew the scene onto a canvas, thus capturing it for all time. He gradually sat up straight and took the documents pertaining to the assault plan on the colonial troops of Intis and Loan that he and his angels were finalizing. Even though it triggered heavy thoughts in him, he wanted to go through it again due to its importance. They even extended their usual meeting times just for this, as there was a lot to debate and consider before they could move forward with their assault plan. You see, Intis and Loan ruled the eastern and western Balam in the same way that the British did in most of their colonies. It was a system of indirect rule in which a colonial state entirely controlled the sectors of foreign policy and the military, but the local people handled most parts of the national administration, though the core of it still fell on the crown of the colonial power. This system had both advantages and disadvantages, with the advantages being that it allowed a colonial power to easily colonize and exploit a country without having to worry about insurgencies, and the disadvantages being that their control over the colony was always destined to be unstable and vulnerable. And, in the case of the southern continent, they meant to take advantage of this. He and his angels hoped to bring the local governments that ruled the eastern Balam and western Balam under their rudimentary control before launching an assault on the military forces of Loan and Intis. Yes, the Numinous Episcopet intended to unleash all of their might on Loan and Intis. And if the assault was successful, which it would be given the date he set, it should completely destroy the hold the northern continent had on the southern continent, liberating it in his name. And they named their plan, Liberty. Todi, Lucian had finally given his approval to begin the first part of their plan, establishing rudimentary authority over local administrations as well as the rebel forces of the southern continent. This wasn't going to be too difficult because the Numinous Episcopet's influence extended there as well, but his angels warned that keeping their deeds hidden from the Loan and Intis would be a real challenge. However, Lucian assuaged their fears by saying that the Angel of Imagination, himself, would cover their tracks. You should have seen Sia's face when he informed Adam that he would also be involved in their plan of liberty, though not directly. With that, Hayter volunteered to lead the control operation, and he agreed. As for Sia, she assumed command of the ongoing conflict between the Numinous Episcopate and the Rose School of Thought. On that note, despite passing the proposal of alliance to Reincarnated last Friday, she had yet to respond. As for the date he had set for the assault, it would happen on December 28, 1349. It was the time when the Great Smog of Backland would occur under the corporations of the Augustus family, Demonist sect, and Ince Zangwill. And it was still going to happen, despite the changes he created, because George Angustus III effectively required that to cover up disappearances from the East Borough and push ahead reforms that were against common standards, paving the way for him to become the Black Emperor. There was also the crucial fact that the true creator and primordial Demoness were attempting to descend on that particular day. All in all, there was no better date for their assault than December 28, since most involved parties would be focused on Backland, not Southern Continent. However, it was still going to be a hardy to pass. And, given the variable of the Rose School of Thought, he may even enter the assault personally on that day. Ultimately, the end of this year was going to see pandemonium unlike anything seen in the Fifth Epoch, and if all goes as planned, he will ascend to the throne of Byam under the witness of the Southern Continent and become the Pale Emperor by the dawn of the new year. That was his first step on his path to truly becoming death, the ultimate end of all things. Lucian sighed deeply, putting down the document and rising from his seat, strolling towards the window and gazing at the vast mountain range and the lush fields that opened around it under the splendor of twilight. Something about them soothed his turbulent heart, and his stiver eyes gradually cleared. But his serenity was soon interrupted. A knock was heard from the door to his office. "Come in," he said, turning towards the door, assuming an impassive countenance. Sta opened the door and entered. "My lord, she is finally here," she informed him, her nose curled in distaste. "Send her in," Lucian merely said. Sia nodded, though her steps towards the door were hesitant, as if she still wanted to say something but eventually decided not to. Lucian didn't dwell on what it was. It should probably just be that she had noticed his heavy mood in recent days. Rather, he hurled all the sensitive documents and reports into the drawer of his personal table and then waited for Bernardet Gustave, the woman in question. The Queen Mystic had already arrived in the Southern Continent a week before, but she didn't immediately come to meet him. Instead, she looked like she was brooding on her decision all week, while roaming around the Southern Continent in disguise, but now, it seemed that she had gathered enough courage to finally face him. The door creaked open, and as he looked up, a beautiful woman emerged. Her chestnut hair was long and straight, and it fell to her hips. Her purple eyes gave off a dim, faint look. Her figure was proportionate, she was neither overweight nor slender. And her outfit was strange, it was a hybrid of traditional clothing from this age and clothing of modern era. Such a combination would have looked terrible on anyone else, but it appeared to suit her strangely, even emphasizing her beauty and grace. Bernardet met his silver eyes as soon as she stepped inside. Although her face remained stoic and passive, her soul spoke to him in a completely different way. Her emotions were a chaotic tangle, almost identical to his emotions when he brooded on his path. It seemed that his message affected her more than he initially thought. "Sit, Bernardet Gustave." Lucian motioned to the chair in front of his table, and she complied, but her anxiety was evident to him no matter how hard she tried to hide it. After all, the body may lie, but the soul does not. So, in order to calm her down, he introduced himself. "I am Lucian Eggers, or, as you may know, the Reaper." "A fool." Bernardet Gustave perceived herself as prudent and wise, but as she willingly stood in front of the door that led to a great existence, she realized she was anything but that. The great existence was known as the Reaper. They had 3-sentence honorific names, which were used solely to honor the gods in the world of mysticism. Either the Reaper was a god, which she highly doubted, or they were on the verge of becoming one, probably at the level of the King of Angels. King of Angels. In the past, beings at that level had served the ancient sun god, himself, yet here she was, bracing herself to face a King of Angels as little more than a saint. Stop this madness. Her father would have shouted at her, his face full of anger and concern, if he knew what she was doing. But he wasn't there. He hadn't been there for her since he seized that god-awful throne and declared himself Emperor Caesar. It affected him in more ways than he probably realized. He wasn't the father she so loved anymore, and she hated him so much for that. You are a fool, Bernadette Gustave. She chastised herself, stifling a sob that was threatening to escape her throat. The door suddenly squeaked open, and she moved forward, assuming an impassive expression. Sia Plaque Eggers, an angel of death pathway, emerged from within, scowling as they confronted each other. This woman probably wanted to watch herself burn in hell. Bernadette understood her rage. The things her father did to the southern continent were not something she was particularly proud of, but she didn't let it affect her, instead meeting her eyes straight. Go in. Sia snapped, her distaste written all over her face. The Lord wishes to see you. Bernadette nodded and walked in the door, recalling how Sta addressed the entity as Lord, reinforcing her notion that she was about to meet with a King of Angels. It was foolish, she was foolish after all. Who comes to the headquarters of an organization with origins dating back to the Third Era in the hopes of meeting with a King of Angels, all because of a letter about their dead father that may very well be false. Yet here she was, as she couldn't bear to give up the only hope she had found after so long to set things right. Clutching that tightly, Bernadette Gustave entered the vast room and looked ahead at a young man sitting behind a short table. He was handsome, with wavy black hair and a razor-sharp jawline to match. He wore deep black robes with golden threads, an outfit reserved for the royals in the culture of the southern continent. But it was his deep silver eyes that truly stuck out, the eyes that resembled the white moon that came last month, and when she met them, she had the impression she was entirely seen through, lulled bare with no secrets or mysteries, and that prospect terrified her, forcing her to instinctively glance away. Sit, Bernadette Gustave, the silver-eyed man said, his voice tranquil like the surface of the water. It somewhat soothed her turbulent heart a bit as she complied and took a seat in front of him with a stoic expression that tried to hide her true emotions, but it was obviously futile as he continued, almost soothingly. I am Lucian Eggers, or, as you may know, the Reaper. Lucian Eggers. So, that was the name of the one known as the Reaper, the name of the one who was about to throw the entire southern continent into chaos, and, more crucially, the name of the one who might have information about her father's condition. Calm down. Lucian interrupted her thoughts. Instantly, her trepidation drained away. Did you just shut down my emotions? Bernadette blinked, her heart strangely tranquil. I just turned them down a notch, Lucian shrugged. You were in no condition to listen to my deal. Heavy silence reigned between them, the papers rustled, and an owl hooted loudly. Did you know why I summoned you? Lucian finally stated. Bernadette knew, all right. The Pale Death, the GRADE0 sealed artifact that I possess, is the sequence 1 characteristic of the death pathway. She took a long breath to prepare herself, then glanced up at his silver eyes. You want that? This makes things a lot easier. Lucian muttered quietly, then stared at her. You see, I value equivalent exchange, so how about this? I'll tell you about your father and some other things about his condition in exchange for the Pale Death. Equivalent exchange, Bernadette repeated in her mind with faint relief. She'd been replaying in her head what would happen when she met the Great Existence, and most of the scenarios didn't end well for her, but now it seemed she was just worrying too much. She was undoubtedly going to accept his offer. It wasn't like she had a choice when she was faced with Lucian, a potential King of Angels. And there was no doubt that he was being kind to her by even suggesting this deal. After all, he could just take it all away at any time. Even with all of her sealed artifacts, sans the wishing lamp, she doubted she'd be able to put up much of a fight against him. A chill suddenly raced down her spine as she reflected on her situation, for she discovered something, Lucian could take the pale death from her with little to no problems, but he didn't. Instead, he seemed to demonstrate kindness by suggesting a deal of equivalent exchange, but why? Bernardet was not that much of a fool to trust in kindness. This world was many things, but it was not kind. There must be another reason behind his deal. What is it? Is he looking for something more than pale death for her? But what could the King of Angels possibly desire from her? That cursed lamp. Could it be related to her father? The curious part of her wanted to use her prying abilities to find answers to her inquiries right then, but she swiftly dismissed the idea, knowing that if she did, she would probably lose control. Ultimately, she forced herself to focus on the situation at hand, before Lucian noticed something amiss. Yes, Bernardet finally answered his question, ignoring the worried pooling in the pit of her stomach. I accept. Good, Lucian said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I am sorry, but I have to ask this. He went on, his languidness fading into somberness with each word. Do you know who assassinated your father? Church of Steam, Church of Sun, and the Sauron family. Bernardet responded instinctively, trying to suppress the triggered recollections of those dreadful times, which threatened to hurl her mind back in time. That's exactly what he wanted everyone to believe. Lucian snorted, then proceeded calmly, recognizing her nervousness. Now, Bernardet, think back to the time before and after your father's assassination, and tell me if there was any extraordinary moment that stood out the most. Under his soft yet commanding words, Bernardet stopped suppressing her memories, which quickly filled her mind, but she used cognition to focus herself solely on finding the most extraordinary moment amid those terrible times. And she quickly discovered it. A day before my father's assassination, the sun turned blazing white, to the point where its bright radiance could be felt all over the world. Bernardet disclosed. No one has still found the objective reason for the appearance of the white sun. She trailed off into astonished silence. No, 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 my father. Bernardet breathed, feeling the air around her become denser with each passing second, was killed by the eternal blazing sun. Did he truly fall? She thought desperately. No, he didn't fall. Lucian seemed to see through her question. Well, technically, he did, he corrected himself. What I'm trying to say is that your father's situation is complicated. What do you mean? Bernardet immediately asked, her hope betraying her. She took several deep breaths, gradually regaining her composure as Lucian began to thrum his fingers. Your father had a sense of wonder, didn't he? Despite her unease at the abrupt change of subject, Bernardet replied. That he did, she echoed lowly, looking down at the necklace that her father gave her. A sense of wonder is something everyone should have, Lucian said wistfully. Wonder at what you see, what you don't understand, what you love. But you must also know when and where to stop, for the world is not kind to the whirling marveller, he finished with quite emphasis. It was a truth your father didn't understand, or perhaps he did, but something still pushed him forward into the unknown, perhaps hope. Hope. Bernardet sat frozen in her seat, taken aback by the irony of the situation. He got corrupted, didn't he? She inquired, her voice low, nearly a whisper in the darkness. Yes, Lucian nodded heavily. That was the reason behind his madness in his later years. Your father attempted everything he could to eliminate the corruption. He even became a god and forced the orthodox gods, themselves, to join in his plans. Her father became a god. Bernardet, for some reason, wasn't surprised by the news because she felt it was given. What happened to him in the end? She eventually inquired, bracing herself for what was going to be disclosed. What do you think? Lucian asked back. Bernardet felt a bitter taste in her tongue as the answer left her mouth. He failed. Your father underestimated the corruption. Lucian stated quietly. But he became a god. Bernardet said wryly. So. Lucian shrugged nonchalantly. A god is nothing in the face of the infinity of the cosmos. The cosmos. Bernardet repeated, and her honed instinct sensed danger as soon as that word was spoken. Nevertheless, she understood everything now. Is that it? She asked, looking up at Lucian, who neither affirmed nor dented. Become an angel. Bernardet Gustave, Lucian said, leaning forward in his seat and clasping his fingers together. Then we can talk about your father more. Bernardet recognized the implications of his remarks, but she persisted, but at the very least, is it safe for me to know his current condition? Become an angel, Luckton merely emphasized, leaving no room for any more questions or arguments. Become an angel. Bernardet inwardly sighed. If only it were as simple as his tone. Lucian, on the other hand, seemed to see through her issues. I know the ritual for becoming a sage, he reflected for a moment. Something big is going to happen in Backland, stopping that should be enough to fulfill your ritual requirement. Backland. Bernardet was surprised by the knowledge and a little appalled by how effortlessly Lucian saw through her again and again. Yes, Lynetton nodded, but even for you, it's going to be dangerous, so have this. He took a silver coin from his robes with a white rose emblem carved on top and tossed it to her, who caught it after feeling no danger from it. This? Bernardet inquired, perplexed. My blessing, Lucian stated. It will conceal your soul from possible manipulations and also protect you from harm beyond your level, so don't hesitate to use it when the time comes, or else you will die, he concluded matter-of-factly. You will die. Bernardet looked at the silver coin. Some part of her wanted to throw the coin as far away as she could, but the part that forced her to come here and face Lucian made her clench her fingers and keep the coin firmly in her palm. You are a fool, Bernardet Gustave. She chided herself. Nevertheless, with her acceptance of the coin, she knew what she had to do next. Under his silver eyes, Bernardet raised her hand and took a sealed object from her personal scow. It was a pale metal mask with a shimmering metal sheen. The pale death. Bernardet rose up, but before she gave Lucian the characteristic, she inquired, succumbing to her curiosity. Why? Why did you do all of this when you could have simply taken it from me? Because, Lucian surprisedly answered, meeting her purple eyes, I need you, Bernardet Gustave. You have a pivotal role to play in the coming change of times. Bernardet handed Lucian the pale death and quickly departed the headquarters, her path set back to Backland, but the words of Lucian continued to resonate in her mind throughout the remainder of her journey. The change of times. Gathering. November 16, 1349. Above the spirit world, there stood a magnificent palace enveloped in the eternal grey fog. Kolain Moretti sat at the head of the bronze table, contemplating the werewolf characteristic he had acquired through the sale of the Hanged Man for over £1,000 using his puppet Mr. World. His heart ached as he thought of his now empty pocket, which only worsened as he considered the unique state of it being cursed. But he soothed his heart, remembering that the Hanged Man had made contact with an artisan from the Church of Steam. Let's hope the deal will be closed this week. I will really like to have another artifact other than Azek's copper whistle. Kolain lampooned. But there is still no clue for the wind-blessed formula that Mr. Hanged Man wants. The wind-blessed potion formula was a sequence 6 potion formula, so it wasn't an easy one to encounter. Alger, the Hanged Man, had been waiting for good news for more than 2 weeks. Miss Justice Audrey, on the other hand, wasn't faring any better. She was undergoing extensive observation and testing by the psychology alchemists, but she seemed confident that she would pass with flying colors because she personally reported to him that she would be officially joining the secret organization soon and hoped to be blessed ahead of time to avoid any accidents. For this, she was prepared to plunder at least 10 pages of Russell's diary entries from the psychology alchemists for him without any compensation. The magician Furs, meanwhile, finally obtained the blood of a deep-sea marlin, the main element for the trick master potion, with the help of the Hanged Man. She was both happy and worried about her coming promotion. All the while, the son Derek, who was acting normally as suggested by the Hanged Man, continued his daily patrols, amassed merit points, and didn't attempt any rituals. For the last 2 tarot gatherings, he would skillfully pretend to be asleep, and he didn't reveal any problems to the Elder Council for the time being. Kolain shifted in his seat unnoticeably, staring ahead at them, who appeared to be wrapping up the information-sharing portion, leading to the end of their gathering. Once again, I gained nothing significant. He thought with little disappointment. Even the Russell's diary pages he received in the past 2 gatherings were just his early entries, allowing him to witness how Russell went from a weakling, who only knew how to dream without taking actual action, to becoming a playboy who actively hunted. As their exchange came to a close, Kolain was about to end the gathering until the hanged man spoke up, drawing everyone's attention. A great existence has arisen on the southern continent. Alger unexpectedly found the ancient palace fall into a reckoning saintance as soon as he revealed the news, which would have been an appropriate reaction if the news had not already been made public and broad. "You don't know?" he asked, reflecting their surprise. Even the world turned still for a moment. "We should know." Kolain, Audrey, and Furs thought in sync, then their thoughts were divulged as they contemplated the shocking news. A great existence. Are they similar to Mr. Fool? Audrey paused, then chastised herself immediately. "No, Audrey, no. That's blasphemy, but. Another great existence, huh?" Furs sulked, "But what should I do with this information? I'm just a sequence 9. Southern continent." Kolain pondered quickly, "Is it related to the Numinous Episcopet, which is attempting to resurrect death? Have they succeeded? Mr. Hanged Man, can you tell us more about this great existence?" Andre inquired, succumbing to her pique. "Well done, Miss Justice." Kolain praised as he brought the world into a listening position, displaying his interest subtly. Furs, too, pushed forward in her armchair, her normal languidness gone. As for Derek, he merely reclined in silence. "Do you need?" Audrey continued, attempting to put a price on the news, but Alger waved his hand, dismissively. "No need, this information is already public." "Public," Kolain analyzed. "However, it appears that not only me but Miss Justice and Miss Magician haven't heard anything about it." Why his thoughts were interrupted when he noticed the hanged man, rather than speaking, turn and look directly at him for permission, and he nodded quietly, catching curiosity and apprehension in the gaze. "Does Mr. Hanged Man want me to comment on this? So that's why he brought this up." The hanged man began solemnly. "Since the end of October, the news of the return of the descendant of death has begun to spread throughout the southern continent. They call him the Reaper. At first, it drew little attention from the official forces until his honorific name was revealed." Iger paused for rising tension. "It is the 3-sentence honorific name reserved for gods." Audrey swallowed, sneaking a glimpse at Mr. Fool, who seemed as immovable as an ancient mountain even in the face of terrifying news. "Well, obviously, he is, after all, also a god." Mr. Fool, on the other hand, was taken aback. "Is it truly a god? But, given my honorific name, there could be other possibilities. Nonetheless, whoever it may be, they should definitely not be a vase like me," he lampooned, before manipulating the world to express his guess to Hanged Man in a raspy voice. "The Reaper is related to the Numinous Episcopet." Kolain purposefully phrased it more of a statement than a question. "Yes," Alger nodded, slightly surprised because he had assumed that the world, based on his reaction, had no awareness of the great existence. "Nevertheless," he answered. "They suspect that he now leads the Numinous Episcopet, influencing the world through it." "I am sorry," Audrey interjected, perplexed. "Numinous Episcopet." Kolain brooded on it for a split second, then controlled the world to answer before the hanged man. In the 4th epoch, the Eggers family, an angel family, ruled the southern continent under the leadership of the Underworld Emperor, also known as Death. However, with the fall of Death and the collapse of the Balaam Empire, the Eggers family founded the Numinous Episcopate with the goal of resurrecting the Underworld Emperor. Could they have succeeded? Furs felt immersed, and it was also a question Audrey was concerned about, given the information that was revealed in previous meetings. All the emperors who participated in the War of 4 Emperors were gods. No. Alger shook his head and spoke objectively. If they had succeeded, the situation would have been far worse than it is now. Nobody could deny that, after all, a resurrection of God was bound to not only attract gods but even push them to personally act. Some actually considered the resurrection of death, Alger said, but it was quickly shot down when the religion of death began to remodel itself away from the teachings of the Underworld Emperor and towards the Reaper. Even the sacred emblem of the religion had been completely changed. Audrey took a moment to digest the information, briefly glad that they didn't have a resurrected god on their heads, but it quickly faded as she remembered something important that they had yet to address. "Mr. Hanged Man, you said the news of the Reaper's existence was public, but why haven't any of us heard about it yet?" "They suppressed it," the world guessed grimly, "and he was sure of it." "That's it." Alger slumped back in his seat, a look of comprehension on his face. Then he nodded gratefully to the world. "Mr. Hanged Man," Audrey pressed, looking in between the Hanged Man and the world. Alger finally responded to her inquiry quietly. The churches and governments should have kept the news from spreading into the northern continent in order to avoid mass panic. Mass panic. Audrey and Furs were both concerned. But why? Audrey inquired tentatively, a horrible sensation building in the pit of her stomach. Furs straightened in her seat in grim anticipation. Even Derek felt the building tension in the gray fog. Miss Justice Alger sighed tiredly. Loan and Intis only managed to colonize the southern continent by exploiting their internal divisions and conflicts, but now every southerner has found one they can pin their dreams and hopes on, one they can trust, one they can unite behind. Ultimately, what do you think will happen? A revolution, Audrey said dazedly. Not just a revolution, Klein said heavily through the world. A war. Klein hoped he was mistaken, but as the Hanged Man implied, what was going to happen seemed all but unavoidable. And, given that news from the southern continent was actively suppressed, he could already guess how bad things were down there. Furs couldn't help but sigh and stroke her temples. War. Audrey thought. But Albert is on the southern continent. Alger seemed to sense her concern. Miss Justice. He said that reassuringly. The upcoming war is unlikely to spread beyond the southern continent and Skos. His counsel did Audrey absolutely no good, and she was already preparing to subtly question her father about the circumstances on the southern continent as soon as the gathering was over. At this moment, the fool, who sat at the edge of the bronze table, tapped on its edge. And everyone turned to face the deity, filled with an array of feelings. Klein pulled them. "The change of times has begun," he said with a mixture of laughter and sighs. The ancient palace above the gray fog once again fell into reckoning silence, as everyone sat still in their seats, holding their breath subconsciously. "Let's end today's gathering here," Klein continued in a gentle tone, shattering the heaviness of the fog. "By your will." Audrey, Alger, and others all stood up and bowed to him at the same moment. The crimson rays of light dissipated, and the ancient place above the gray fog returned to its former tranquility. Only Klein remained alone on the fool's high-hacked chateau, brooding in conflict and doubt. Should I write a letter to Mr. Azek about the situation on the southern continent? But he has no idea I am still alive. Later that day, East Balam, Kolain. Away from his duties and responsibilities, Lucian took a brief respite at his favorite restaurant in the jewel of the southern continent. He was savoring every bite of the food he had ordered. Merlin was there as well, boasting ardently of his travels in the spirit world. And all around them was the distilled chaos of the restaurant, laughter and chuckles, footsteps and tracks, tings and clings. But suddenly all sounds melted away, and Merlin froze in place, his extended eyes looking forward with humane alarm. Aneddon sighed wearily, putting down the fork and knife and rubbing his mouth with a napkin. "Perhaps I should stop traveling so publicly, but the food here is so good." A young man emerged and sat in front of Lucian. He had black eyes, curling black hair, a bored forehead, and a thin face. A crystal monocle was draped above his right eye. "That's an interesting bird you have." "Deal." A young man emerged and sat before Lucian. He had dark eyes, curling black hair, a broad forehead, and a thin face. And he wore a crystal monocle over his right eye. "That's an interesting bird you have." Lucian regarded the young man wearing a monocle with a blank expression. He was none other than Amon the Blasphemer. It was obviously not his main body, he could tell that. It was probably only an avatar at the angel or saint level. To be honest, he wasn't that surprised that Amon managed to find him despite all of his efforts of concealment, considering everything, but what really captured his attention was the question of why the blasphemer was here. Amon, based on what he knew from the original novel, was extremely dangerous. He was a pleasure seeker who was just interested in stimulation and cheeriness. He didn't seem to care about anything, treating everyone and everything as toys or playmates. However, this was not what made him extremely dangerous, rather, it was the fact that he was a pure mystical creature with no humanity. Now, why was Amon here? Perhaps just for the sake of it. They weren't technically enemies, so did he see Lucian as his new toy to play with till he got bored? Or was there another reason? Did Adam reveal anything to Amon? Though that's unlikely. As the questions and possibilities raced through his mind, Lucian maintained his cool and responded, "Why, thank you." He ruffled Merlin's back in an effort to calm down his messenger. "He is my creation." Merlin, on the other hand, was hooting at Amon with a mix of anger, anxiety, and trepidation. He immediately flapped his wings, getting closer to Lucian, as Amon focused on him with a smile. "What is he saying?" "He is saying that he is not a bird, but a proud OWI spirit. Don't jump him along with those foolish beasts." Lucian translated, a faint chuckle escaping his lips. And the Reaper met his monocled eye. "He doesn't like you," he concluded with a hushed emphasis. "Quite feisty, aren't you?" Amon grinned, but not at Merlin but at Lucian. "So he sees me as his new toy." No, he is the god of deceit. He may simply be putting up a front to get me to believe that and let down my guard for whatever he has planned. What a pain. All I wanted was some delicious dinner. Is that too much to ask? Lucian sighed inwardly, but his ego sparred him to respond to Amon, refusing to back down in the face of the blasphemer. "Quite snoopy, aren't you?" Amon's smile widened as he adjusted his monocle, but he didn't appear to be interested in playing jab with Lucian. "Where are my manners?" He reached out his hand to Lucian. "I'm Amon." Lucian answered, but instead of shaking his hand, he swiftly sent Merlin back into the spirit world, who was becoming unsettled by the mounting tension at the table. "And I know who you are, god of deceit. My, it appears that my reputation precedes me. Can't say I am surprised." Amon withdrew his hand, unfazed by the rudeness. "But I hope you don't believe everything those orthodox gods say about me. I may be the god of deceit, but even I, in some ways, fall short of deception when compared with them." He kept going with zeal. "After all, their civilization was built on lies. You truly are the blasphemer," Lucian emphasized with furrowed brows as he begrudgingly admitted the scant amount of truth contained in the blasphemer's last words. "The one and only." Amon extended his hands, narcissistically emphasizing himself. He then gave Lucian a contemplative look. "Does that bother you? I didn't think you cared that much about traditions and honorifics. You do not know me." Lucian shrugged. "Oh, but I do." Amon adjusted his monocle. "You are the one that broke the trend of times. You are the one who is about to disrupt the world as a whole. You are the one that the gods—" "Yes, I have heard them all." Lucian interpreted sharply. "But you still do not know me," he emphasized. "What and who I actually am," he said, narrowing his eyes at Amon. "Do you find the mystery of my existence intriguing? Is that why you're here?" He phrased his guess as a question rather than a statement because you could never be sure with the god of Deceit. "I can't deny that your existence is intriguing, but I'm not here for it." Amon admitted frankly, which surprised Lucian. "Lucian, you are the harbinger of chaos." "Harbinger of chaos?" Lucian pondered. "That's new." Amon continued. "With each action you take, you bring chaos into the world, and chaos is exactly what the world needs right now. Things have been too normal and monotonous since the beginning of this epoch, but thanks to you, things are starting to get interesting again." His monocle glowed with light. "In light of this, I'd like to make you a deal." "Deal?" Lucian arched his brow. "You see, it is simple." Amon cracked a grin. Lucian knew it was not going to be simple at all. The Angel of Time's grin winded. "I will side with you in the coming change of times." It would be an understatement to say Lucian was surprised, for he didn't know what game Amon was playing with him. "What do you want to return?" he inquired in an effort to understand the situation completely. "Same," Amon revealed calmly. "You want to form an alliance." Lucian couldn't believe it. "Yes," Amon laughed heartily. "An alliance between the Reaper and the blasphemer. It would be a sight to behold." Consider the fame and power we could achieve. Even the gods would be appalled by us. Ignoring his boasting, Lucian considered his proposition carefully. He was aware that even with Adam's help, the southern continent would still be outmatched by the combined strength of the northern continent, but the existence of Amon might just change that. However, if he accepted his deal, he would have to side with the blasphemer in the final battle for the Lord of Mysteries. Ultimately, Lucian looked at Amon. No. Leaving aside the benefits and drawbacks of the deal, he didn't give it much thought before firmly dismissing it. He had no trust in the god of deceit, and who knows how many ulterior motives he had in the name of the deal. Amon didn't look surprised, but his smile faded. Are you sure? He insisted. Consider your situation for a moment. Even with my zealot brother on your side, you will be helpless when the seven gods decide enough is enough. No, Lucian emphasized. Your deal is pretty vague and unclear. What else were you expecting? But above all, I don't trust you. But you trust my brother. Amon retorted playfully. I don't exactly trust him, Lucian admitted tentatively. Our relationship is mutually beneficial. That's exactly what I was proposing with our alliance. Amon nailed the coffin down neatly. Well played, Amon. Lucian's lips twitched, feeling himself being pushed into a corner by Amon. I've had this subtle feeling since I met you, Amon complained, but now I'm certain. You are prejudiced against me. Okay, he isn't entirely wrong. Lucian sighed and rubbed his temples. Listen, Amon, I said what I said. He said it in a tone that left no room for any more arguments or questions. Even yet, he was unconcerned about arousing the tray of the Angel of Time all because of Adam. If he and Amon didn't end up as allies, they certainly weren't enemies. Fine, Amon stood up, dejected and disappointed. But my deal is still in effect, so if you change your mind, recite my honorific name, you know that too, don't you, and I will be there to discuss all the details and intricacies of the deal. Then he was gone, as abruptly as he had emerged. Lucian reclined in his chair, the chaos of the restaurant flooding his senses, but even those blissful smiles and giggles couldn't take his mind off the meeting with Amon and his nonplussing deal. Outside the Storm Cathedral in Kolain, within a bustling square erected with a water fountain, Amon emerged, striding unnoticeably towards a sitting bench. Adam was there, feeding bread crumbs to the pigeons. I told you to stay away from him, he remarked as Amon sat down beside him. Fine, fine, Amon sighed and rolled his eyes. You can keep your puppet all to yourself. Amon. Adam stressed, his eyes gleaming at his brother. He is not a puppet or a toy, he is much more than that. Amon fell silent for a moment, his gaze locked on the enormous bell at the Storm Church. The pigeons chirped, and the mortals chattered, blissfully oblivious of the hell that was about to descend into their world. I know, the Angel of Time declared, a grin forming across his lips, and that's what makes him all the more interesting. I know, the Angel of Time declared, a grin forming across his lips, and that's what makes him all the more interesting. You are treading on a dangerous path, Amon. Adam cautioned. Amon waved his hand dismissively. I have no qualms about taking a few risks to help the Chaos Bringer, after all, I revel in chaos. He is not going to agree to your deal, Adam stated simply. Oh, but he will. Amon smiled and adjusted his monocle. He still doesn't realize the gods have made their move, does he? I can already imagine his reaction as he finds out about the wretched and hopeless path ahead of him. He looked at Adam. With only your help, he can't win. So his agreement to my deal is all but inevitable. He finished triumphantly. At the time, even you will have no choice but to include me in your grand story, my zealot brother. Adam stood up from the bench. You do not know him, he said with silent emphasis, fading into the dreams of the world. Amon was unfazed, the light in his monocle shining ever so brilliantly, as though it were about to illuminate the entire world. So many mysteries and unknowns. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.